The storm wasn't supposed to come that night, but when rancher Cole Mercer burst through the nursery door at midnight, soaked in rain and panic, he found something that stopped his heart cold. The poor widow he'd hired just to clean his barn was cradling his screaming twins, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "I'm so sorry I couldn't save mine." What happened next would shake the Wyoming Territory to its core. Stay with me until the end of this story and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The stagecoach rattled to a stop outside Redwood Ranch on a Tuesday afternoon in late September 1887, kicking up dust that hung in the air like a question nobody wanted to answer. Eleanor Gray was the only passenger to step down onto the hard-packed earth of the Wyoming Territory, and she did so with the careful movements of a woman who'd learned that life could knock you flat if you gave it half a chance. She was 32 years old, but looked older, the kind of older that doesn't come from years, but from carrying weight no human shoulders were meant to bear. Her dress was clean but threadbare, patched at the elbows with fabric that didn't quite match. Her brown hair, streaked with premature gray, was pulled back so tight it made her temples ache. But she didn't loosen it. Pain was familiar. Pain was almost a comfort now. The canvas bag she carried held everything she owned in the world. 2 more dresses just as worn as the one she had on, a wooden hairbrush with half its bristles missing, a tin cup, a small Bible with water-stained pages, and a tiny knitted bootie the color of summer sky. That bootie never saw a baby's foot. It was supposed to. God knows it was supposed to. Eleanor stood there in the dying light, squinting at the sprawling ranch before her. Redwood Ranch wasn't the biggest spread in the territory, but it was substantial. A 2-story house with a wraparound porch, a massive barn that looked like it could swallow 3 families whole, corrals that stretched toward the horizon, and outbuildings scattered like afterthoughts across the property. Cattle dotted the distant hills, and she could hear the low sound of horses moving in the paddock. She didn't belong here. She knew that. But she didn't belong anywhere anymore, so one place was as good as another. "You lost?" The voice came from her left, and Eleanor turned to see a man walking toward her from the barn. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, with broad shoulders that spoke of years of hard labor. His dark hair needed cutting, and stubble shadowed his jaw. He wore work clothes, denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest that had seen better days. A wide-brimmed hat cast shadows across features that might have been handsome once, before grief carved lines around his mouth and eyes. This was Cole Mercer. She'd heard about him in town when she'd asked about work. Widower. Lost his wife 3 years back. Raising twins alone. Didn't talk much. Didn't smile at all. Ran a tight operation and expected hard work from anyone on his payroll. "No, sir," Eleanor said quietly, gripping the handle of her bag tighter. "I heard in town that you needed help. Someone said you might need someone to work in the barn." Cole stopped about 10 feet away, his gray eyes studying her with the kind of assessment a man gives a horse he's thinking about buying. Not cruel, but not particularly kind either. Just practical. Measuring. "I need someone to muck stalls, feed livestock, clean tack, and keep the barn in order," he said bluntly. "It's hard work. You done that kind of work before?" "I grew up on a farm, sir. I know my way around horses and cattle. I can work hard. I don't complain, and I don't make trouble." "Pay is $20 a month plus room and board," Cole continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "Room is the barn loft. Board is 2 meals a day, breakfast and supper. You cook for yourself. There's a stove in the tack room you can use. You stay out of the main house unless I specifically tell you otherwise. You don't bother my children. You don't gossip with the house staff. You do your work and keep to yourself. Those are the terms. You can take them or leave them. $20 a month. Eleanor had been making half that doing laundry and mending in town, barely scraping together enough for a rented corner of a room that smelled like cabbage and despair. The woman who owned the boarding house had made it clear just yesterday that if Eleanor couldn't come up with next week's rent, she'd be on the street. "I'll take them, sir," Eleanor said. Cole gave one curt nod. "You start now. Barn's through there. My foreman, Dutch, will show you what needs doing. He'll also show you where you'll sleep and where the extra blankets are kept. Gets cold at night this time of year." "Thank you, sir." Cole was already turning away, heading back toward the house, when he paused and looked over his shoulder. For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been curiosity or pity, or just the reflex of a man who used to have better manners before life beat the courtesy out of him. "What's your name?" he asked. "Eleanor Gray, sir." "Who, you got family, Eleanor Gray?" The question landed like a fist to her sternum. Eleanor's throat tightened, and she had to swallow twice before she could answer. "No, sir, not anymore." Cole held her gaze for another moment, and she saw something shift in his expression. Recognition, maybe. The look of someone who understood that particular kind of alone. "Well then," he said quietly, "welcome to Redwood Ranch." Then he was gone, disappearing into the house and closing the door firmly behind him. Eleanor stood there for a moment, listening to the wind whisper through the grass and the distant lowing of cattle. Then she picked up her bag and walked toward the barn. The barn was enormous. It had to be 50 feet long and nearly as wide, with a high-peaked roof and a hayloft that ran the entire length of the building. The smell hit her immediately: hay and horses, leather and manure, dust and wood, and something else she couldn't quite name. Something that smelled like work and sweat, and animals living their lives in the uncomplicated way animals do. A man was forking hay into one of the stalls when she entered. He was shorter than Cole, stocky and graying, with the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd spent every day of his 60-some years outdoors. "You must be the new barn hand," he said, setting down the pitchfork and wiping his hands on his pants. "I'm Dutch, been working for Cole since before his pa died and left him this place." "Eleanor Gray," she said, extending her hand. Dutch shook it with a firm grip. "You ever worked a ranch before, Eleanor?" "Farm, sir. Not a ranch, but I'm a fast learner." "Well, you'll need to be. We got 20 horses in here on any given day, plus whatever cattle we bring in for doctoring or when the weather turns bad. You'll muck stalls twice a day, morning and evening. You'll feed and water the stock. You'll clean and oil tack. You'll sweep the floors and keep the hayloft organized. You'll fix anything that breaks if you can, and you'll fetch me if you can't. I do most of the veterinary work, but you'll assist when needed. Sound manageable?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Let me show you where you'll sleep." Dutch led her up a ladder to the loft. It was spacious up there, lit by 2 windows at either end that let in slanting afternoon light. Hay bales were stacked along one side, leaving a clear space on the other where someone had set up a rough living area. A cot with a thin mattress, a small table, a chair, and a trunk for storage. "Ain't much," Dutch said, "but it's dry and out of the wind. There's extra blankets in the trunk. Outhouse is behind the barn. You can wash up at the pump by the corral. The tack room has a wood stove you can use for cooking. We keep basics down there: coffee, flour, salt, some bacon if you're lucky. You can supplement with eggs from the chicken coop if you're nice to the hens." Eleanor set her bag on the cot. The mattress was thin, but it was better than some places she'd slept. "Thank you," she said. "I appreciate the work." Dutch studied her for a moment, his eyes kind despite the gruffness in his voice. "You running from something or toward something, girl?" The question was gentle but direct. Eleanor considered lying, then decided there was no point. She'd be found out eventually anyway. "Neither, sir. I'm just trying to survive." Dutch nodded slowly. "Well, that's an honest answer. I can work with honest. Come on down when you're settled. I'll show you the routine." He climbed back down the ladder, leaving Eleanor alone in the loft. She sat on the edge of the cot and looked around at her new home. It wasn't much, but it was hers, at least for now. And right now, that was enough. She allowed herself 30 seconds to sit still, to breathe, to let the exhaustion wash over her. Then she stood up, smoothed her dress, and climbed back down the ladder to begin her work. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of labor that left Eleanor's muscles screaming and her hands raw, despite the calluses she'd built up over the years. She rose before dawn every morning when the sky was still purple and the stars were fading. She'd make her way down from the loft, light a lantern, and begin mucking out the stalls while the horses shifted and nickered in their sleep. There was something peaceful about those early morning hours. The barn was quiet except for the soft sounds of animals breathing and the rhythmic scrape of her shovel against wood. The work was hard, but it was simple, direct. You could see the results immediately: a clean stall where there'd been a dirty one, fresh hay where there'd been old, water buckets filled where they'd been empty. Dutch was a patient teacher, showing her how to properly clean and oil the tack so the leather stayed supple, how to check a horse's hooves for stones or injury, how to measure out grain so each animal got exactly what it needed. He didn't talk much while they worked, but when he did speak, it was usually to share some piece of practical wisdom. "Horse acts up when you're leading it, you check its feet first," he told her one morning. 9 times out of 10, there's a stone or a bruise. Animal can't tell you what's wrong, so you gotta be paying attention. Eleanor paid attention. She paid attention to everything. She paid attention to the rhythms of the ranch, the way the cowboys rode out before sunrise and didn't return until dusk, covered in dust and smelling like cattle and sage. The way the house staff moved around the main building, a handful of women who eyed her with suspicion whenever they came to the barn for fresh eggs or to deliver messages to Dutch. She paid attention to Cole Mercer, though she tried not to. He was a hard man to read. He moved through the ranch like a force of nature, efficient, decisive, and utterly self-contained. He spoke to his men in short, clipped sentences that brooked no argument. He rode out with them most mornings and returned with the same grim set to his jaw that suggested he carried the weight of the whole operation on his shoulders alone. Eleanor saw him from a distance most days. He'd ride past the barn, his eyes sweeping over everything with the practiced gaze of a man who missed nothing. Sometimes he'd stop to speak with Dutch about a horse or a repair that needed doing. He never spoke to Eleanor directly. Barely looked at her, in fact. And she was careful to stay out of his way, to become invisible the way she'd learned to become invisible in every place she'd been since losing everything that mattered. But she saw the house, and she saw the children. They were 3 years old, the twins, a boy and a girl. She'd glimpsed them a few times through the windows of the main house, moving like small ghosts through rooms that seemed too big for them. The house staff mentioned them occasionally, how Miss Lily wouldn't eat her vegetables, how Master Sam had gotten into the flour bin again, how they drove their father to distraction with their endless energy and needs. Eleanor never got close to the house. She honored Cole's instructions to the letter. But sometimes in the evenings when the work was done and she sat in the loft watching the sun set over the Wyoming hills, she could hear them. Laughter sometimes. Crying more often. The high piercing wail of children who needed something they weren't getting. Those sounds reached into her chest and twisted something there. Something that had been twisted so many times it was permanently bent out of shape. She'd lost her baby 4 years ago. A little boy, born too early, who'd lived for 3 hours in her arms before slipping away so quietly she almost didn't notice. She'd been alone then, too. Her husband had died 6 months earlier in a mining accident, and his family wanted nothing to do with the pregnant widow who had no money and no prospects. She'd held her son while he died, and she'd sung to him. A lullaby her own mother had sung to her. And when it was over, when the midwife had gently taken the tiny body from her arms, Eleanor had folded up that song and locked it away in a place so deep inside herself that she thought she'd never hear it again. But she heard it now sometimes, late at night, when the crying from the main house went on and no one seemed able to make it stop. She heard it, and something in her chest ached with a pain that was both old and fresh, both distant and immediate. The first real conversation she had with Cole Mercer happened on a Thursday night in early October. Eleanor was in the tack room, sitting on an overturned bucket and eating a simple supper of fried eggs and bread, when the door swung open and Cole walked in. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his hair sticking up like he'd been running his hands through it, his shirt untucked and stained with what might have been spit up. He stopped when he saw her, clearly not expecting anyone to be there. "Sorry," Eleanor said quickly, starting to stand. "I'll take this back to the loft." "No," Cole said, holding up a hand. "Stay. I just came to check if Dutch left the liniment for the bay mare's leg. You seen it?" "Yes, sir. Top shelf, left side." Cole found it, a dark bottle with a handwritten label. He stood there for a moment, holding it, staring at nothing in particular. Eleanor hesitated, then said quietly, "Sir, are you all right?" It was too personal a question. She knew that the moment the words left her mouth. But Cole didn't rebuke her. He just let out a long, slow breath and leaned against the workbench. "The twins," he said finally. "They've been crying for 2 hours straight." I've tried everything, fed them, changed them, walked with them, sang to them. Well, attempted to sing. I can't carry a tune to save my life. Nothing works. The housekeeper says they're just colicky, that all babies go through it. But they're not babies anymore. They're 3. And I don't know what they need. His voice cracked on the last word, and Eleanor saw something she hadn't expected to see. Vulnerability, raw, honest helplessness. My wife, Cole continued, still not looking at her, she would have known what to do. She always knew. She could quiet them with just a touch, just her voice. Me? I'm good with cattle and horses and ledgers, but children? He shook his head. I'm failing them. Every day, I'm failing them. Eleanor set down her plate. Her heart was pounding, and she knew she should stay quiet, should stay in her place. But she couldn't, not when she heard that much pain in someone's voice. Sir, she said carefully, sometimes children cry because they're scared. Not of anything specific, just scared of the big feelings they're having that they don't understand yet. And sometimes what they need isn't someone to fix it or make it stop. Sometimes they just need someone to hold them and let them know they're not alone in it. Cole finally looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time since she'd arrived. You speak from experience? He asked. Eleanor's throat tightened. I had a son, sir, a long time ago. He didn't get to grow up. But in the time I had with him, I learned that sometimes just being there is enough, even when you can't fix it, even when there's no fixing it at all. The silence that followed was heavy with shared understanding. 2 people who'd lost everything, standing in a tack room that smelled like leather and horse sweat, connected by the universal language of grief. I'm sorry, Cole said finally, for your loss. And I for yours, sir. Cole nodded slowly. He pushed off from the workbench and moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. The barn work, he said. Dutch tells me you're doing a good job, better than the last 2 people we hired. Thank you, sir. And Eleanor? He looked back at her. Call me Cole. Sir makes me feel like my father. Yes, sir. Cole. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost like he might smile. Then he was gone, taking the liniment with him and leaving Eleanor alone with her cold eggs and the memory of the first real conversation she'd had in longer than she could remember. 2 nights later, everything changed. Eleanor was already in the loft, settled into her cot with one of the extra blankets pulled up to her chin against the October chill, when she heard it, crying. Not just fussing or normal childhood tears, but the kind of desperate, inconsolable wailing that spoke of real distress. She tried to ignore it. Tried to tell herself it wasn't her business, that Cole had made it clear she was to stay away from the house and the children. But the crying went on, rising in pitch and intensity until it felt like it was drilling directly into her skull. No, that wasn't right. It wasn't drilling into her skull. It was reaching into her chest, into that twisted place where she kept her grief and pulling on something there that refused to stay buried. Eleanor sat up in the darkness, her heart racing. Through the loft window, she could see lights on in the main house, shadows moving past the windows. She could imagine Cole up there, exhausted and desperate, trying everything he knew to comfort children who wouldn't be comforted. Stay out of the house unless I specifically tell you otherwise. Those had been his words, his rules, and she'd agreed to them. But that crying, God, that crying! Eleanor found herself on her feet before she'd consciously decided to move. She pulled her shawl around her shoulders and climbed down the ladder, her bare feet silent on the rungs. She crossed the dark yard between the barn and the house, guided by the light spilling from the upper windows and the sound of those desperate cries. She should turn back. She knew she should turn back. But her feet kept moving, carrying her up the porch steps and to the front door. She raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. What was she doing? She was the barn worker, the widow nobody wanted. What right did she have to? A particularly anguished wail cut through the night, and Eleanor's hand made the decision her mind couldn't. She knocked, 3 firm raps that echoed in the darkness. The door opened a moment later, and a middle-aged woman in a nightdress and cap stood there, her face haggard with exhaustion. This must be Mrs. Brennan, the housekeeper Dutch had mentioned. What do you want? Mrs. Brennan demanded, her voice sharp with irritation and exhaustion. "I heard the children," Eleanor said quietly. I thought perhaps I could help." "Help?" Mrs. Brennan's laugh was harsh. "You're the barn woman. What would you know about children?" "I know crying," Eleanor said simply. "And I know what it sounds like when it won't stop." Before Mrs. Brennan could respond, another voice came from inside the house. "Who is it?" Cole appeared behind the housekeeper, and Eleanor's breath caught. He looked like a man at the end of his rope. His shirt was half unbuttoned, his hair was wild, and he was holding his daughter Lily against his shoulder while she screamed into his neck. His son Sam was visible behind him, clutching his father's leg and crying almost as hard as his sister. "It's the barn woman," Mrs. Brennan said dismissively. "She says she can help." Cole's eyes met Eleanor's across the threshold, and something passed between them, desperation meeting compassion, pride meeting need. "Please," he said, and that single word contained more vulnerability than Eleanor had heard in her entire 3 weeks at the ranch. Mrs. Brennan stepped aside, and Eleanor entered the house. The nursery was on the second floor, a spacious room with 2 small beds, a rocking chair, and walls decorated with painted flowers that must have been the late Mrs. Mercer's touch. It should have been a peaceful, comfortable space. Instead, it felt like a battlefield, with toy blocks scattered across the floor and 2 exhausted adults trying to manage 2 inconsolable children. "I've tried everything," Cole said, his voice ragged as he paced with Lily still screaming against his shoulder. "Fed them, changed them, checked for fevers. Nothing's wrong. They're just crying." Sam was on the floor now, his face red and tear-streaked, his small body shaking with sobs. Mrs. Brennan stood near the door, her arms crossed, clearly at the end of her patience. Eleanor looked at the children, and something in her chest cracked open. "May I?" she asked Cole, holding out her arms for Lily. Cole hesitated for only a moment, then carefully transferred his daughter to Eleanor's arms. The little girl continued to cry, but Eleanor didn't try to stop it immediately. She just held her, one hand supporting her small back, the other gently cradling her head. "It's all right," Eleanor murmured, her voice low and steady. "It's all right to cry, little one. Sometimes the world is too big and too scary, and all you can do is cry." She began to sway gently, an unconscious movement that came from somewhere deep in her body's memory. Not bouncing or jiggling, just a slow, rhythmic swaying like a tree in a breeze. Then, without thinking about it, without giving herself time to remember that she'd locked this away forever, Eleanor began to sing. "Hush now, sweet darling, don't you cry. Mama's here beneath the sky. Stars above will keep you near, nothing in the dark to fear." The song was old, probably older than her grandmother had been. The words were simple, the melody plaintive and sweet. Eleanor's voice cracked on some of the notes. She hadn't sung in 4 years, and her throat was tight with emotion. But she kept going. Cole stood frozen, watching her. Mrs. Brennan's expression shifted from skepticism to something softer. And Lily's screaming began to quiet. Not immediately, but gradually, her sobs becoming hiccups, her rigid body beginning to relax against Eleanor's shoulder. Eleanor kept singing, kept swaying, and as she sang, she became aware of small hands tugging at her skirt. She looked down to see Sam standing there, his tear-stained face turned up to her, his thumb in his mouth. Without breaking the rhythm of her song or her swaying, Eleanor lowered herself to the floor, sitting cross-legged with Lily in her lap. Sam immediately climbed into her lap too, curling against his sister, both of them pressed against Eleanor's chest. "Dream of meadows, dream of spring, dream of every gentle thing. Morning comes with golden light. But for now, just sleep tonight." Lily's breathing was evening out now, her small fist clutching Eleanor's shawl. Sam's thumb was still in his mouth, but his eyes were drooping, his body becoming heavy with approaching sleep. Eleanor kept singing, cycling through the verses again, her voice growing stronger as muscle memory took over. She was dimly aware of tears running down her own cheeks, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. This was the song she'd sung to her son as he died. The song she'd sworn she'd never sing again because it hurt too much, because it brought back memories so sharp they could cut her to ribbons. But here were these children, these living, breathing children who needed exactly what her son had needed, someone to hold them and tell them they weren't alone. When Eleanor finally fell silent, Both twins were asleep in her arms, their breathing deep and even, their small bodies completely relaxed. The room was quiet except for the ticking of a clock on the mantel and the sound of Eleanor's own heartbeat in her ears. She looked up to find Cole staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. Wonder, maybe, or confusion, or something deeper that she didn't dare name. "How did you do that?" he whispered. Eleanor looked down at the sleeping children in her arms, these babies who weren't hers but who, for this moment, felt like they could be. "I just remembered what it's like to need someone," she said quietly. "And I answered." Mrs. Brennan cleared her throat. "Well," she said, her voice grudging but no longer hostile, "I suppose that worked. Mr. Mercer, shall I take them to their beds?" But Cole was still looking at Eleanor, and when he spoke, his voice was soft. "No, let her do it." Eleanor carefully stood, her muscles protesting after sitting still for so long while holding two children. Cole guided her to the first small bed, where she gently laid Lily down and pulled the blanket up to her chin. The little girl stirred but didn't wake, just turned her head and sighed. Then Eleanor moved to Sam's bed and repeated the process, tucking him in with the same careful tenderness. When both children were settled, she stepped back, suddenly aware of how improper this all was. Her, a barn worker, in the master's house, in his children's nursery, in her nightclothes with her hair loose around her shoulders. "I should go," she said, moving toward the door. "Wait." Cole's hand caught her arm, gentle but firm. She stopped, not looking at him, afraid of what she might see in his face. "Thank you," he said. "I don't know what you did or how you did it, but thank you." Eleanor finally looked up at him. In the soft lamplight of the nursery, his face had lost some of its hardness. He looked younger, more vulnerable, more human. "You asked me earlier if I spoke from experience," Eleanor said quietly. "I did. I do. And I couldn't—" Her voice caught. "I couldn't hear them crying like that and not try to help. I'm sorry if I overstepped." "You didn't," Cole said. He released her arm but didn't step back. "You did what I should have been able to do but couldn't. That's not overstepping. That's—" He paused, searching for words. "That's grace." Eleanor's eyes burned with fresh tears. She nodded once, not trusting her voice, and then slipped past him into the hallway. Mrs. Brennan was waiting at the top of the stairs, her expression complicated. "That was well done," she said, which for her seemed to be high praise. "Perhaps Mr. Mercer might call on you again if such a situation arises." "Perhaps," Eleanor said softly. She descended the stairs and let herself out of the house, closing the door quietly behind her. The night air was cold against her tear-streaked face as she crossed the yard back to the barn. She climbed the ladder to the loft and sat on the edge of her cot, her whole body shaking. She'd sung the song. After 4 years of silence, she'd sung her son's lullaby to someone else's children, and they'd lived. They'd fallen asleep in her arms and lived. Eleanor buried her face in her hands and wept for her lost son, for these living children, for the man in the house who loved his babies but didn't know how to comfort them, and for herself, the widow who'd thought she'd buried her capacity to mother anything ever again. But maybe, she thought as her tears finally slowed, maybe that capacity wasn't dead. Maybe it was just sleeping, waiting for someone to need it badly enough to wake it up. Outside, the Wyoming night stretched dark and vast overhead, full of stars and secrets and second chances that came when you least expected them. And in the main house, 2 children slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, while their father sat in the hallway outside their room, his head in his hands, wondering what it meant that a woman he barely knew could give his children something he couldn't. The answer to that question would change all their lives. But that story, the story of how a widow hired just to clean the barn became the mother of a rancher's children, was only beginning. Eleanor woke the next morning to the sound of roosters crowing and the first pale light of dawn filtering through the loft windows. For a moment she lay still, disoriented by the memory of the night before. Had she really gone to the main house? Had she really held Cole Mercer's children and sung them to sleep? The dampness of her pillow from last night's tears confirmed it wasn't a dream. She rose quickly, splashing cold water on her face from the basin she kept by her cot, and dressed in her work clothes. Her hands trembled slightly as she braided her hair. What would Cole say when he saw her this morning? Would he regret allowing her into his home, into that intimate space with his sleeping children? Would he remind her of the boundaries she'd crossed? Dutch was already in the barn when she climbed down the ladder, mucking out the first stall. "Morning," he said, glancing at her. Then he looked again, more closely. "You all right? You look like you didn't sleep much." "I'm fine," Eleanor said, reaching for a pitchfork. "Just a restless night." Dutch studied her for another moment, then nodded. "Well, we've got extra work today. 2 of the mares need shoeing, and Cole wants the tack room reorganized before winter sets in proper. You up for it?" "Yes, sir." They worked in companionable silence for the next hour, the familiar rhythm of labor helping to settle Eleanor's nerves. She was carrying a bucket of water to the last stall when she heard boots on the barn floor behind her. She turned to find Cole standing there, still wearing yesterday's clothes, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. But his expression was softer than she'd ever seen it. "Eleanor," he said, "could I speak with you for a moment?" Her heart jumped into her throat. "Of course!" Dutch, reading the room with the instinct of a man who'd worked with people for decades, announced, "I'll just go check on that fence line," and disappeared out the barn door. Cole waited until he was gone, then said, "The twins slept through the entire night. First time in 2 weeks. They woke up this morning happy, asking for breakfast, playing with their toys like nothing had ever been wrong." Eleanor set down the water bucket, not trusting herself to speak. "I don't know what you did," Cole continued, stepping closer. "What you said or sang or how you held them, but it worked. And He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to know you can say no. There'll be no consequences to your job here if you do." "All right," Eleanor said carefully. "Would you be willing to help with them again? The twins. Not as their nursemaid. Mrs. Brennan handles most of their daily care. But when they get like that, when nothing else works, would you come? I'd pay you extra, of course. Another $10 a month on top of your barn wages." Eleanor's mind reeled. $30 a month total. That was more money than she'd ever made in her life. But more than that, he was asking her to be part of his children's lives, to step across the invisible line that separated the barn worker from the household. "You don't have to pay me extra," she heard herself say. "If the children need comfort, I'll come. That's not something you should have to pay for." Cole's expression shifted, something like respect crossing his features. "You're a better person than most I've met, Eleanor Gray, but I'll pay you anyway. You're doing work, and work deserves compensation. Is that agreeable?" "Yes," Eleanor whispered. "It's agreeable." "Good." Cole nodded, then seemed to hesitate before adding, "My wife, Catherine, she used to sing to them, different songs, but the way you did it last night reminded me of her. Not because you're like her, but because you gave them what she used to give them, peace, safety. That's a rare gift." "Your wife was lucky," Eleanor said softly, "to have children to sing to." The words came out before she could stop them, raw and honest. Cole's eyes met hers, and in that gaze she saw understanding. "And your son was lucky," he said quietly, "to have a mother who loved him enough to still carry his song after all this time." Eleanor's vision blurred with sudden tears. No one had spoken about her baby like that before. Like he'd been real, like his brief life had mattered. "Thank you," she managed. Cole nodded once more, then turned and walked out of the barn, leaving Eleanor standing there with tears running down her cheeks and her heart feeling both heavier and lighter than it had in years. What? The first week after that night established a new pattern. Eleanor continued her barn work during the day, but 3 times that week, Cole came to fetch her when the twins grew inconsolable. Each time she went to the nursery, held them, sang to them, and somehow, through grace or instinct or the mysterious alchemy of human connection, managed to soothe what no one else could. The house staff watched this development with varying degrees of suspicion and resentment. Mrs. Brennan seemed grudgingly accepting, acknowledging that Eleanor achieved results even if she didn't understand how. But the younger maid, a woman named Sarah with sharp features and sharper eyes, made her feelings clear. It's not natural, Eleanor heard her say to the cook one afternoon when she'd come to the kitchen to fetch warm milk for Sam, who'd been fussy. A barn woman coming into the house, handling the master's children like she has any right. Mark my words, she's got designs on this place. Now, Sarah, the cook said, though her tone was uncertain, Mr. Mercer asked her to help. It's not like she's pushing her way in. Isn't it, though? Sarah's voice was acid. Convenient, isn't it? Pretty widow shows up with a sad story, worms her way into the barn, then suddenly she's indispensable with the children. Next thing you know, she'll be moving into the house, wearing the late Mrs. Mercer's dresses, playing Lady of the Manor. Eleanor stood frozen in the hallway, the warm milk cup trembling in her hands. That's enough gossip, the cook said firmly. Get back to your work. Eleanor waited until she heard footsteps retreating before she moved. She delivered the milk to the nursery where Mrs. Brennan was trying to coax Sam into drinking it, then returned to the barn without speaking to anyone. That night, lying in her loft bed, Eleanor stared at the ceiling and tried to examine her own heart honestly. Did she have designs on Redwood Ranch? On Cole Mercer? The answer was complicated. She didn't want his land or his money or his position. She'd never been motivated by those things. But his children. God help her, she was already falling in love with his children, with Lily's serious little face and the way she clutched Eleanor's collar when being held, with Sam's gap-toothed smile and the way he called her Elna, because he couldn't quite manage her full name yet. And Cole himself? Eleanor wasn't sure what she felt there. Gratitude? Certainly. Respect for how hard he tried despite his grief. Compassion for a man who loved his children but didn't know how to speak their language. But was there something more? Something that stirred when he looked at her with those gray eyes that had seen too much loss? Eleanor turned over and pulled the blanket up to her chin. It didn't matter what she felt. She was the barn worker. He was the rancher. There was a vast gulf between them that no amount of lullabies could bridge. She needed to remember that, for everyone's sake. October gave way to November, and the Wyoming Territory began its descent into winter. The days grew shorter and colder, frost coating the grass each morning. Eleanor acquired an extra blanket from Mrs. Brennan and spent her evenings in the tack room by the wood stove, mending her clothes and trying to stay warm. The twins continued to have their difficult nights, and Eleanor continued to answer when called. But she also began seeing them at other times. Lily started waiting by the barn door in the afternoons, watching for Eleanor to emerge from mucking stalls. Sam would toddle across the yard with Mrs. Brennan in tow, bringing Eleanor dandelions he'd picked, or interesting rocks he'd found. They talk about you, Mrs. Brennan said one afternoon, her tone neutral but not unkind. Ask for you when you're not around. I don't know if that's good or not, but I thought you should know. Eleanor's chest tightened. I never meant to confuse them or step on your toes, Mrs. Brennan. I know you're the one who cares for them. I care for their bodies, the older woman said. I feed them, clothe them, keep them clean and safe. But you, she paused, choosing her words carefully. You tend something different, something I can't reach. Maybe something they've been missing since their mother died. I'm not trying to replace her. I know that. But maybe they need someone who can give them what she used to. Mr. Mercer, he loves them fiercely. But he's a man, and he's drowning in his own grief. He can't be everything they need, much as he tries. Eleanor nodded slowly. What are you saying? Mrs. Brennan sighed. I'm saying I'm not fighting you anymore. Those children need you. I can see that now, but be careful, girl. The house staff talk, and not all of it is kind. Sarah, in particular, has taken a dislike to you. I've noticed. Then watch your step. A woman in your position, with no protection and no family, can't afford to make enemies. It was good advice, Eleanor knew. But she also knew that some things were worth the risk. And those two small children with their mother's eyes and their father's stubborn chin were rapidly becoming worth everything. The crisis came on a Tuesday night in mid-November. Eleanor was in the loft, already in her nightdress and preparing for bed, when she heard shouting from the main house. Not crying this time, but adult voices raised in alarm. She was down the ladder and running across the yard in her bare feet before she'd consciously decided to move. The front door stood open, and she rushed inside to find chaos. Cole was on the stairs carrying Sam, whose face was flushed bright red and whose breathing was labored and wheezing. Mrs. Brennan was right behind him with Lily, who was crying hysterically. "What happened?" Eleanor demanded. "Fever," Cole said tersely. "Both of them. Started an hour ago. Sam can't breathe right." Eleanor looked at the little boy in Cole's arms and felt ice slide down her spine. She'd seen this before, in children on the farm where she'd grown up. Croup, they'd called it. It could be deadly if it got bad enough. "We need steam," she said immediately. "Bring him to the kitchen. Mrs. Brennan, set water to boil. Multiple pots. We need this room full of steam." For a moment, everyone froze, surprised by the command in her voice. Then Cole was moving, carrying Sam toward the kitchen, and Mrs. Brennan was hurrying ahead to fire up the stove. Eleanor took Lily from Mrs. Brennan's arms. The little girl was burning up, her forehead hot against Eleanor's cheek. "Sarah!" Mrs. Brennan shouted. "Fetch cold water and cloths, now!" The next hour was a blur of controlled panic. They closed the kitchen doors and windows, letting the room fill with steam from the boiling pots. Cole held Sam upright, the little boy's chest heaving with each labored breath, while Eleanor showed him how to tent a towel over Sam's head to trap the steam. "Breathe, baby," Cole murmured, his voice rough with fear. "Come on, Sam. Breathe for Papa." Eleanor worked on Lily, sponging her burning skin with cool water, trying to bring the fever down. The little girl whimpered and cried, but gradually the flush in her cheeks began to recede. "Is he getting better?" Cole asked, his eyes wild with fear as he looked at Eleanor over Sam's dark head. Eleanor moved closer, listening to Sam's breathing. It was still labored, still wheezing, but the panic-inducing rasp had eased slightly. "The steam is helping," she said. "Keep him in it. Keep talking to him. Let him hear your voice." "I don't know what to say. Anything. Tell him about the ranch, about the horses, about tomorrow. Just let him know you're here." Cole nodded and began speaking in a low, steady voice. "Remember that bay mare, Sam? The one you liked? Tomorrow, when you're feeling better, we'll go see her. You can give her an apple. She likes apples almost as much as you do." Eleanor worked between both children, monitoring their breathing, their temperatures, their responses. Mrs. Brennan kept the water boiling, refreshing the steam. Even Sarah, despite her hostility, worked efficiently, bringing clean cloths and fresh water when needed. It was nearly midnight when Sam's breathing finally eased to something close to normal. His fever broke around 1 in the morning, sweat soaking his small body as his temperature dropped. Lily's fever had broken an hour earlier, and she'd fallen into an exhausted sleep in Eleanor's arms. Cole slumped against the kitchen wall, still holding Sam, his face gray with exhaustion and lingering fear. "How did you know what to do?" he asked Eleanor. "My father's farm," she said quietly, gently shifting Lily to a more comfortable position. "We lost a child to croup when I was young, a neighbor boy. After that, my mother learned everything she could about treating it. She taught me. Said you never know when knowledge like that might save a life. It saved one tonight," Cole said, his voice thick. "Maybe 2. If you hadn't been here, if you hadn't known—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "But I was here," Eleanor said firmly, "and they're going to be fine." Mrs. Brennan, sitting at the kitchen table with her head in her hands, looked up. "You should sleep here tonight," she said to Eleanor. "Both of you should. Stay close to the children in case they take a turn." It made sense, but Eleanor hesitated. "I don't want to presume—" "You've earned the right to presume," Cole interrupted. "Mrs. Brennan is correct. We'll all stay down here tonight. There's a settle in the parlor that's long enough to sleep on, and the couch in the library. I'll take one, you take the other. Mrs. Brennan, can you set up a temporary bed for the twins in the drawing room, somewhere we can all hear them if they need us?" "Already planning it," Mrs. Brennan said, pushing herself to her feet. Within an hour, they'd created a makeshift sick room in the drawing room. Both twins were settled on a pallet of blankets and pillows on the floor, still sleeping deeply. Cole took the settle in the parlor, positioned where he could see through the drawing room doorway. Eleanor settled on the library couch with a blanket Mrs. Brennan provided. "Thank you," Mrs. Brennan said quietly before she went upstairs to her own room, "for knowing what to do, for being here." "Of course," Eleanor whispered. But sleep didn't come easily, despite her exhaustion. She lay in the darkness of the library, listening to the sounds of the house settling, the soft breathing of the children in the next room, and the occasional creak from the settle where Cole lay. "Eleanor?" His voice came quietly through the darkness. "You still awake?" "Yes." "I need to tell you something." She waited, her heart beating faster. "When Catherine was dying," Cole said, his voice so low she had to strain to hear it, "she made me promise something. She said, 'Don't let them grow up without softness, without someone who knows how to be gentle.'" I didn't understand what she meant then. I thought I could be both parents, could be everything they needed, but I was wrong. Eleanor heard him shift on the settle. "You're giving them what I promised her I'd make sure they had," he continued, "and I'm grateful. More grateful than I know how to say. So thank you for keeping a promise." I didn't know how to keep myself. Eleanor's eyes burned with tears in the darkness. She must have been an extraordinary woman. She was, and I think— Cole paused. "I think she would have liked you." The word settled over Eleanor like a benediction. She wiped at her eyes and whispered into the darkness, "Thank you for telling me that." No more words were exchanged. Eventually, Eleanor drifted into an uneasy sleep, her dreams full of steam and fevered children and a dead woman's whispered blessing. When dawn came, both twins were markedly better. Their fevers had stayed down, their breathing was clear, and though they were tired and clingy, they were out of danger. Cole insisted Eleanor take the day off from barn work to rest, but she refused. "I'll rest tonight," she said. "Right now I need the normal. I need the routine." He understood that, she could tell. Sometimes the best thing after a crisis was the familiar rhythm of ordinary work. But as Eleanor crossed the yard back to the barn in the gray morning light, she was aware of eyes watching from the kitchen window. Sarah stood there, her expression dark with something that looked like hatred. Eleanor's steps faltered for just a moment. Then she straightened her shoulders and kept walking. She'd done nothing wrong. She'd helped sick children. If Sarah chose to see something sinister in that, it was Sarah's problem, not hers. Or so she tried to tell herself. But Mrs. Brennan's words echoed in her mind. A woman in your position, with no protection and no family, can't afford to make enemies. Eleanor had a sinking feeling that she'd just made one anyway, whether she could afford it or not. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange sort of peace. The twins recovered fully from their illness, but something had shifted in the household dynamic. Cole began inviting Eleanor to the house not just for emergencies, but for regular visits. Would she like to have supper with them in the kitchen? Could she spare an hour in the evening to read to the children before bed? Eleanor agreed to these invitations cautiously, always aware of her position, always careful not to overstep. But it was hard not to feel a growing attachment to this small, broken family that was trying so hard to knit itself back together. Lily started saving her drawings to show Eleanor. Sam began ending his bedtime prayers with, "And bless Elna." Cole started seeking her opinion on small matters. Did she think Lily was old enough to start learning letters? Should he be worried that Sam was so shy around strangers? It felt domestic. It felt dangerous. It felt like everything Eleanor had thought she'd lost forever when her husband and son died. And it terrified her. "You're getting too attached," she told herself sternly one evening as she climbed back up to the barn loft after reading the twins a bedtime story. "They're not your children. This isn't your life. Don't forget that." But her heart wasn't listening to her head anymore. The situation came to a head on a cold Saturday in early December. Eleanor was in town buying supplies, flour, sugar, coffee, using part of her wages from the extra work with the children. She was just leaving the general store when she nearly collided with a woman in an expensive wool coat. "Excuse me," Eleanor said, stepping aside. The woman looked her up and down, taking in Eleanor's worn dress and work-roughened hands. "You're the widow working at Redwood Ranch, aren't you?" "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Dorothy Fleming. My husband owns the bank, and we're close friends with the Mercer family. Or we were before Cole became so isolated after Catherine's death." Eleanor wasn't sure what to say to that, so she said nothing. Mrs. Fleming continued, her voice dropping to a confidential tone that still carried clearly. "I've heard some concerning rumors about you, that you've been spending quite a lot of time in the main house, with the children. Some people are wondering about your intentions." Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks. I help with the children when Mr. Mercer requests it, ma'am. That's all. Is it? Mrs. Fleming's smile was sharp. My dear, I'm not judging you. A widow with no prospects has to look out for herself. But you should know that people are talking, and Cole Mercer, for all his current difficulties, is still one of the most eligible men in the territory. His late wife's family, his friends, the decent people of this community, we all have an interest in seeing that he remarries appropriately when the time comes. To someone of suitable background and breeding. The implication was crystal clear. Eleanor was neither. I have no designs on Mr. Mercer, Eleanor said, her voice tight. I'm simply trying to do my job. Of course you are. Mrs. Fleming's tone suggested she believed nothing of the sort. I just thought you should know what people are saying. For your own protection, you understand. A woman in your position can't be too careful about her reputation. She swept past, leaving Eleanor standing on the wooden sidewalk with her small bag of supplies and a growing sense of dread. The rumors were spreading, and if someone like Dorothy Fleming knew about them, then everyone knew about them. Eleanor walked back to the ranch in the gathering dusk, her mind churning. She should distance herself from the main house, from the children, from Cole. It was the smart thing to do, the safe thing. But when she reached the ranch and saw Lily and Sam playing in the yard, saw them look up and shout, "Elna!" with pure joy, saw them come running toward her with open arms. How could she walk away from that? She caught them both in a hug, one on each side, and felt their small bodies pressed against her, trusting and warm and alive. We missed you, Lily said. Papa said you went to town. Did you bring us anything? Eleanor had bought them each a peppermint stick with her own money, unable to resist. She pulled them from her pocket now, and the twins' faces lit up with delight. What do you say? Came Cole's voice from the porch. Thank you, Elna, they chorused. Eleanor looked up to find Cole watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. It wasn't the look of an employer watching his hired help. It was something warmer, something more personal, something that could get them both into serious trouble. Children, go wash up for supper, Cole said. Take your treats with you. Eleanor, could I speak with you for a moment? Eleanor's stomach clenched as the twins ran off toward the house. She followed Cole to the porch, where he leaned against the railing and studied her face. Something happened in town, he said. It wasn't a question. How did you know? You have a terrible poker face. What was it? Eleanor hesitated, then decided he deserved the truth. I ran into Mrs. Dorothy Fleming. She informed me that people are talking about my presence here, about my work with the children. She suggested that I might have inappropriate intentions regarding your household. Cole's jaw tightened. Dorothy Fleming is a gossiping busybody who has nothing better to do than mind other people's business. Perhaps, but if people are talking, let them talk. Mr. Mercer, Cole, you don't understand. This could damage your reputation, the children's reputation. And mine is already worth so little that your reputation is worth everything to me, Cole interrupted, his voice fierce. Because you are worth everything to my children, and anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me personally. Eleanor's breath caught. You can't fight the whole town. Watch me. Cole stepped closer, and Eleanor was suddenly very aware of how little space separated them. Eleanor, I don't care what Dorothy Fleming or anyone else thinks. You've been a gift to this family. You've given my children something I couldn't give them. You've given me... He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. You've given me hope that maybe we can be whole again someday. I won't give that up because of small-minded gossip. But the children love you. I see it every day, and I... He stopped, his expression shifting to something Eleanor couldn't quite read. I'm grateful for you, more than you know. There was something unspoken in those words, something that hung in the air between them. Eleanor knew she should step back, should put physical and emotional distance between them, but she couldn't seem to make herself move. I'm grateful too, she whispered, for the work, for the chance to be needed again. Cole reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers gentle. The gesture was too intimate, too tender, and Eleanor knew she should pull away, but she didn't. Elna, Papa, supper's ready. Sam's voice called from inside. The spell broke. Cole dropped his hand and stepped back, clearing his throat. "We should go in," he said. "Yes," Eleanor agreed. But as they walked into the house together, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between them. Something that couldn't be undone, no matter how much gossip it generated or how dangerous it became. She was falling in love with this family, with the children who called her name and brought her flowers, with the man who looked at her like she was something precious instead of just another hired worker. And God help her, she didn't know how to stop. December arrived with a vengeance, bringing snow that blanketed the Wyoming territory in white silence. The ranch slowed its pace as winter settled in. The cattle moved to lower pastures, the horses spending more time in the barn than out. Eleanor's world contracted to the warm spaces she could occupy. The barn with its animal heat, the tack room with its wood stove, and increasingly the main house where two small children waited for her each evening. The gossip that Mrs. Fleming had warned about didn't disappear. If anything, it intensified. Eleanor could feel it in the way conversation stopped when she entered the general store, in the sidelong glances from ranch hands, in the tight-lipped disapproval of some of the townsfolk when they saw her walking with the twins on the rare occasions Cole brought them into town. But Cole kept his word. When the banker's wife made a pointed comment at church about inappropriate familiarity between classes, Cole stood up in the middle of the congregation and announced that Eleanor Gray was a valued member of his household staff, and anyone who had a problem with that could take it up with him personally. No one did. Sarah, however, was another matter entirely. The maid's hostility had evolved from mere dislike into something more poisonous. She accidentally spilled dirty wash water on Eleanor's clean clothes hanging to dry. She spread whispers among the other staff that Eleanor was trying to trap Cole into marriage, that she was using the children to worm her way into his bed and his fortune. She went out of her way to make Eleanor's visits to the house as uncomfortable as possible. "The master wants his children read to in the nursery, not the kitchen," Sarah said one evening, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I'm sure even you can understand the difference between servant spaces and family spaces." Eleanor bit back a sharp retort. "Of course. Thank you for clarifying." But Mrs. Brennan, who'd been present for the exchange, spoke up sharply. "Mr. Mercer specifically said Eleanor could read to the children wherever was most comfortable. The kitchen is warm and close to the stove. The nursery is drafty. Use your head, Sarah, if you've got one." Sarah's face flushed with anger, but she couldn't argue with the housekeeper. She shot Eleanor a look of pure venom before stalking away. "That girl is going to be trouble," Mrs. Brennan muttered. "I've tried talking to her, but she's got it in her head that you're some kind of threat. You watch yourself around her." Eleanor did watch herself, but she couldn't be vigilant every moment of every day, and Sarah was patient. The first real incident came on a Wednesday afternoon in mid-December. Eleanor was in the barn, up in the loft, organizing hay bales, when she heard Lily's voice calling from below. "Elna! Elna! Where are you?" Eleanor climbed down the ladder to find both twins standing in the barn entrance, bundled in coats and scarves, their noses red from the cold. "What are you two doing out here?" Eleanor asked, immediately concerned. "Where's Mrs. Brennan?" "She's sleeping," Sam said, "and Papa rode out with the men. Sarah said we could come find you if we wanted." Eleanor's stomach dropped. Mrs. Brennan never slept during the day, and Sarah would never give the children permission to wander around the ranch unsupervised. This had been deliberate. "Let's get you back to the house right now," Eleanor said, taking their hands. "It's too cold for you to be out here." She hurried them across the yard, her mind racing. What was Sarah's game? Was she trying to make it look like Eleanor was neglecting her duties to play with the children, or was there something more sinister at work? They were halfway to the house when Dutch came running from the direction of the corrals, his face urgent. "Eleanor, thank God. The bay mare, she's foaling early and there's trouble. I need your hands. Now." Eleanor looked at the children, then at Dutch, torn. "I can't leave them." "I'll take them," came a voice from behind her. Eleanor turned to see Sarah standing on the porch, her expression all false concern. "Poor dears, out in this cold. Come along, children. Let's get you warmed up." Lily clung to Eleanor's skirt. "I want to stay with Elna." "Lily, sweetheart, I have to help with the horse," Eleanor said, crouching down to the little girl's level. "You go with Sarah and get warm. I'll come see you as soon as I can, all right? Promise? I promise. Reluctantly, the twins went with Sarah. Eleanor watched them go, unease prickling at the back of her neck, but Dutch was already pulling her toward the barn. She's in bad shape, he said as they ran. Breech birth. If we don't get that foal turned, we'll lose them both. The next 2 hours were a blur of blood and sweat and desperate effort. Eleanor had helped with difficult births before, back on her father's farm, but this was one of the worst she'd seen. The mare was exhausted, the foal was stuck, and every minute that passed decreased their chances of survival. There, Eleanor gasped, her arms aching from being shoulder-deep in the birth canal. I've got the leg. Pull when I say. Together, they managed to turn the foal. It slipped out in a rush of fluid, limp and not breathing. Eleanor's heart sank, but Dutch was already there, clearing the foal's airways, rubbing it vigorously with hay. Come on, little one, he muttered. Come on. For a long, terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the foal gasped, coughed, and drew a shuddering breath. That's it, Dutch said, relief flooding his face. That's it. Eleanor slumped against the stall wall, exhausted and covered in birth fluids, but grinning. The mare was already nuzzling her foal, making the low sounds of a mother greeting her baby. You did good, Dutch said, clapping Eleanor on the shoulder. Real good. Couldn't have saved them without you. You would have managed. No, I wouldn't have. Dutch's expression was serious. You've got a gift with animals and with people, from what I've seen. This ranch is lucky to have you. Eleanor's throat tightened with emotion. Thank you, Dutch. That means a lot. Now go get yourself cleaned up and go see those twins. They'll be wanting to know you kept your promise. Eleanor washed as best she could at the pump, though she knew she still smelled like horse and hay. Then she hurried to the main house as the winter sun began to set, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. The house was strangely quiet when she entered. No sounds of children playing, no clatter from the kitchen where supper preparations should be underway. Hello? Eleanor called. Mrs. Brennan? No answer. Eleanor climbed the stairs to the nursery, her unease growing with each step. The door was closed, which was unusual. She pushed it open. The room was empty. The children's beds were neatly made, their toys put away. No sign of Lily or Sam. Eleanor's heart began to pound. She checked the other upstairs rooms, calling their names. Nothing. She ran back downstairs, checking the kitchen, the parlor, the library. Empty, all of them. She found Mrs. Brennan in the housekeeper's room off the kitchen, just waking from what looked like a deep sleep. The older woman's eyes were unfocused, her movements sluggish. Mrs. Brennan, where are the children? What? The children? Mrs. Brennan shook her head as if trying to clear it. They were with Sarah. I needed to rest my eyes for a moment. I don't know what came over me. Eleanor's blood ran cold. She'd seen this before. Her grandmother, dosed with laudanum when she was sick. That unnatural, heavy sleep. Where's Sarah? I don't know. She said she was going to take the children for a walk before supper. In this weather? In the dark? Eleanor was already moving, grabbing her shawl from where she'd left it. How long ago? An hour? Maybe more? Eleanor, what's wrong? But Eleanor was already out the door, running into the gathering darkness, calling the twins' names at the top of her lungs. The snow had started falling again, light flakes that would soon cover any tracks. Eleanor ran to the barn first, thinking maybe Sarah had brought them there, but it was empty except for the horses and the new foal. She checked the other outbuildings, the chicken coop, the smokehouse. Nothing. Panic was starting to claw at her throat now. Where would Sarah take them? And why? Then Eleanor remembered the old line shack about a mile from the main ranch buildings. It was used during spring roundup, but sat empty most of the year. It would be cold, isolated, and far enough away that no one would hear the children if they cried. Eleanor started running toward it, her breath coming in gasps, her feet sliding on the snowy ground. She had no coat, no gloves, nothing but her shawl and her mounting terror. Lily! Sam! She screamed into the wind. Where are you? The snow was falling harder now, the wind picking up. Eleanor's hands and feet were going numb, but she didn't slow down. She couldn't. Those children were out here somewhere, lost and cold and frightened. She was halfway to the line shack when she heard it, a child's cry, thin and distant. "Sam!" Eleanor shouted. "Lily! Can you hear me?" "Elna!" The voice came again, stronger this time. It was Lily. Eleanor ran toward the sound, her lungs burning, her muscles screaming. And there, huddled against a fallen tree, she found them. Both twins were there, coatless despite the cold, their faces red and tear-streaked. They were alone. No sign of Sarah anywhere. Eleanor fell to her knees beside them, gathering them into her arms. They were cold, so cold, but they were alive and breathing, and here. "It's all right," she gasped, wrapping her shawl around them both, pulling them against her body for warmth. "I've got you. You're safe now." "Sarah said we were going to see the baby horses," Lily sobbed. "But then she left us here. She said Papa didn't want us anymore. She said we were bad children and we had to stay here." "She's lying," Eleanor said fiercely, rubbing their arms and backs, trying to generate heat. "Your Papa loves you more than anything in the world. And I love you. We're going to get you home and warm, all right? Can you walk?" "I'm tired," Sam whimpered. "I know, sweetheart, but we need to move. We need to get you out of this cold." Eleanor tried to stand with both children, but her legs wouldn't support the weight. She was exhausted from the foaling, frozen from the cold, and now trying to carry 2 3-year-olds. She got them both standing and started walking, half carrying, half dragging them through the deepening snow. The wind was bitter, cutting through her thin dress like knives. She could barely feel her feet anymore, and her hands were clumsy and stiff. They'd gone maybe 100 yards when Eleanor's vision started to blur. Her body was shutting down, hypothermia setting in. She tried to push through it, but her legs gave out, dumping all 3 of them into the snow. "No," Eleanor whispered. "No, I have to get them home. I promised." She tried to stand again, but couldn't. Her body wouldn't obey anymore. So instead, she pulled the twins against her, wrapped her shawl and her body around them as best she could, and held them tight. If she couldn't get them home, she would at least keep them warm. She would give them every bit of heat her body could provide, even if it meant freezing to death herself. "Tell me a story, Elna," Lily whispered against her chest. Eleanor's mind was foggy, her thoughts slow, but she forced herself to speak. "Once upon a time," she began, her voice slurred, "there was a little girl and a little boy who were the bravest children in all the world." She was still telling the story, her words becoming less coherent, when she heard the sound of horses' hooves and men's voices shouting through the storm. "There! I see something!" Strong arms lifted her, pulled the children from her grip. She tried to fight, tried to hold on to them, but she had no strength left. "Easy, Eleanor, easy. We've got them. They're safe." Cole's voice, rough with fear and relief. Eleanor tried to focus on his face, but everything was spinning. "Sarah," she managed to whisper. "She did this. Drugged Mrs. Brennan, left them in the cold." "I know. Dutch found her trying to leave the ranch. She confessed everything." Cole's arms tightened around her. "You found them. You saved them. Now let us save you." Eleanor felt herself being lifted onto a horse, felt Cole climb up behind her, his body warm and solid against her frozen back. The twins were with Dutch and another ranch hand wrapped in blankets. "Stay awake, Eleanor," Cole said urgently in her ear. "Stay with me. Don't you dare leave us now." But Eleanor was so tired, and the darkness was so inviting. She let herself drift, trusting that Cole would get them all home safe. Her last conscious thought was a prayer. "Thank you for letting me save them. Thank you for letting me keep my promise." Then there was nothing but warmth and darkness, and the distant sound of Cole's voice calling her name. Eleanor woke to firelight and the smell of wood smoke and something medicinal. She was in a bed, not her cot in the barn loft, but a real bed with soft sheets and heavy blankets. Her body ached everywhere, and when she tried to move, her hands and feet screamed with the pain of returning circulation. "Easy." A gentle hand pressed her shoulder back down. "Don't try to move yet." Eleanor forced her eyes to focus. Mrs. Brennan sat beside the bed, her face drawn with worry and guilt. "The children," Eleanor croaked. "Are they?" "They're fine. Cold and frightened, but fine. The doctor's been. He said another hour out there and we might have lost them. You saved their lives, girl." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Where are they? I need to see them. They're sleeping in the nursery with their father sitting guard. He hasn't left them since we got back, except to check on you every 10 minutes. Mrs. Brennan's voice softened. He's been beside himself. We all have been. Sarah? Mrs. Brennan's expression hardened. In the sheriff's custody, she confessed to everything, drugging my tea with laudanum, luring the children outside, leaving them to freeze. She said she was trying to prove you were unfit, that you'd neglect the children in a crisis. She thought if they got sick or hurt while in your care, Mr. Mercer would fire you and send you away. That's insane. Yes, well, jealousy and spite can make people do insane things. She'll hang for what she did, or at least spend the rest of her life in prison. Attempted murder of children is about as serious as it gets. Eleanor closed her eyes, trying to process it all. Sarah had been willing to kill 2 innocent children just to get rid of her. The thought was almost too horrible to comprehend. Where am I? She asked, looking around the room. It was large and well-appointed, with furniture that was clearly expensive and well-made. Definitely not the barn loft. The master bedroom, Mrs. Brennan said. Well, the guest master bedroom. Mr. Mercer insisted. Said he wasn't having you recover in a drafty barn after what you did. I can't stay here. It's not appropriate. You let Mr. Mercer worry about what's appropriate. Right now you need to rest and heal. You have frostbite on 3 of your fingers and 2 of your toes. Nothing that won't heal, the doctor says, but it'll be painful for a while. You're also recovering from severe hypothermia and exhaustion, so you're staying in this bed until the doctor says otherwise, and that's final. There was no arguing with that tone. Eleanor settled back against the pillows, wincing as her damaged fingers brushed the blanket. Can I see them? She asked quietly. The children? Just for a moment? Mrs. Brennan's stern expression softened. I'll ask Mr. Mercer. But Eleanor, you need to understand something. What you did tonight, running out into that storm, nearly dying to save those children, that changes things. It changes how everyone sees you, how Mr. Mercer sees you. What do you mean? But Mrs. Brennan just shook her head. You'll see soon enough. Rest now. I'll bring you some soup when you're ready. Eleanor drifted in and out of consciousness for the next few hours, waking each time to find someone sitting by her bed. Dutch once, checking on her with quiet concern. The ranch doctor another time, examining her extremities and murmuring his approval of her progress. And once, she woke to find Cole sitting in the chair by the window, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking with what might have been sobs. She tried to speak, to tell him she was all right, but sleep claimed her again before she could form the words. When she finally woke fully, it was to find both twins standing beside her bed, their small faces solemn and frightened. Cole stood behind them, his hand on each of their shoulders. Elna? Lily whispered. Are you dead? Despite everything, Eleanor managed a weak smile. No, sweetheart. I'm not dead, just very tired. Papa said you saved us, Sam said, his thumb finding its way to his mouth. He said you ran into the snow and found us and kept us warm. Of course I did. I promised I would come find you, didn't I? But you got hurt, Lily said, tears spilling down her cheeks. Your hands are all bandaged and you're in bed like when people are dying. I don't want you to die, Elna. Come here, Eleanor said, lifting her less damaged arm. Cole helped them climb carefully onto the bed, and Eleanor gathered them against her side. They curled into her, their small bodies warm and alive and safe. I'm not going to die, she told them. I'm going to get better, and then I'm going to go back to work in the barn, and you can still come visit me every day. Nothing has to change. Everything has changed, Cole said quietly. His voice was rough, like he'd been crying or shouting, or both. Eleanor, what you did was what anyone would have done. No, Cole interrupted, moving closer to the bed. It's not. Most people would have gone for help, organized a search party, done the reasonable thing. You ran out into a blizzard with no coat, no supplies, nothing but your determination to find them. You nearly died saving my children. Our children, Eleanor said without thinking, then froze as she realized what she'd said. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... Don't apologize. Cole's hand found hers, careful of her bandaged fingers. Eleanor, I need to tell you something. I've been trying to find the words for weeks now, maybe months, and I've been a coward about it. But after tonight, after almost losing you, I can't keep silent anymore." Eleanor's heart began to pound. The twins, sensing the change in atmosphere, looked back and forth between the adults. "Cole, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." He took a deep breath. "You came here as a barn worker. Someone to muck stalls and oil tack and stay out of the way. But from the first night you sang to my children, you became so much more than that. You became their comfort, their peace, the softness in their lives that my wife begged me to make sure they had. And somewhere along the way, you became essential to me too." "I'm just doing my job," Eleanor whispered. "No," Cole said firmly. "You're being family, and I'm asking, no, I'm begging for you to make it official." Eleanor's breath caught. She must have misunderstood. She must be feverish, hallucinating. "What are you saying?" Cole dropped to one knee beside the bed, still holding her hand. The twins gasped with excitement. "I'm saying marry me, Eleanor Gray. Marry me and be the mother my children need, be the partner I need, be the heart of this household that's been missing since Catherine died. I can't offer you romance or poetry. I'm a rancher, not a poet. But I can offer you a home, a family, and my promise that I will spend every day trying to be worthy of what you've given us." Eleanor stared at him, tears streaming down her face. This couldn't be real. Men like Cole Mercer didn't propose to widows who worked in their barns. They married women from good families, women with dowries and social standing, and— "Elna, say yes," Lily urged. "Then you can live with us always and always." "Please, Elna," Sam added. "Please be our mama." Eleanor looked at their faces, Cole's desperate hope, the twins' eager joy, and felt something break open in her chest. All the walls she'd built around her heart, all the defenses she'd erected to keep from getting hurt again, came tumbling down. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes, I'll marry you." Cole's face transformed with relief and joy. He reached up to cup her cheek with his free hand, gentle with her injuries. "Thank you," he said roughly. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for saving my children. Thank you for coming into our lives and teaching us how to be a family again." The twins cheered, bouncing on the bed until Mrs. Brennan appeared in the doorway and scolded them for disturbing the patient. But she was smiling too, Eleanor noticed. Everyone was smiling. "There's going to be talk," Eleanor said quietly to Cole as Mrs. Brennan herded the children out to give them privacy. "People will say I seduced you, trapped you, used your children to—" "Let them talk," Cole interrupted. "I don't care what Dorothy Fleming or anyone else thinks. I know the truth. You're the woman who risked everything to save my children. You're the woman who kept a promise even when it nearly killed her. That's the only truth that matters. What if I can't be what you need? What if I'm not good enough?" "Eleanor," Cole's voice was firm, "you are more than good enough. You're everything." Eleanor closed her eyes, letting those words sink into her soul. Everything. She was everything. For the first time since her husband and son had died, Eleanor let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved a second chance at happiness. That maybe God hadn't forgotten about her after all. That maybe her story didn't end with loss and grief, but could continue with love and family and hope. "When?" she asked. "When do you want to marry?" "As soon as you're well enough to stand," Cole said. "I'm not giving you time to change your mind." "I won't change my mind." "Good." He leaned forward and pressed a kiss to her forehead, tender and reverent. "Rest now. You've got a family waiting for you to get well." As Cole left the room, Eleanor lay back against the pillows and let the tears come. But these weren't tears of grief or pain. They were tears of gratitude, of relief, of overwhelming joy. She'd come to Redwood Ranch with nothing but a canvas bag and a broken heart, hired just to clean the barn and stay out of the way. But somehow, through grace or fate, or the mysterious workings of divine providence, she'd found something infinitely more precious. She'd found her way home. Eleanor spent the next 3 days in that guest bedroom, her body slowly healing from its ordeal. The doctor came twice daily to check her frostbitten fingers and toes, changing bandages and nodding with satisfaction at her progress. Mrs. Brennan brought meals on trays and sat with her while she ate, filling the silence with gentle chatter about ranch business and the upcoming Christmas preparations. but it was the twins who were her constant companions. They seemed unable to bear being away from her for more than an hour at a time, as if they feared she might disappear if they let her out of their sight. They colored pictures at the foot of her bed, played with their toys on the floor nearby, and begged for stories until Eleanor's voice grew hoarse. "Tell us about when you marry Papa," Lily demanded on the third afternoon, curled against Eleanor's side like a contented kitten. "I don't know what to tell you, sweetheart. We haven't planned anything yet." "Will you wear a pretty dress?" Sam asked from his spot on the other side of the bed. Mama's pictures show her in a pretty dress when she married Papa. Eleanor's heart clenched at the mention of Catherine Mercer. "I'm sure your mama was beautiful on her wedding day." "She was," Cole said from the doorway, making Eleanor jump. She hadn't heard him come in. He walked to the bed and sat carefully on the edge. She wore white silk with lace at the collar, her mother's dress, altered to fit. The whole town came to the church to see us married. There was no sadness in his voice as he spoke of his late wife, only gentle remembrance. Eleanor relaxed slightly. "That sounds lovely," she said quietly. It was. Cole reached out and tucked a strand of Eleanor's hair behind her ear, the gesture already becoming familiar. "But I don't need all that this time. Just you, me, the children, and a preacher. Unless you want something more elaborate?" Eleanor almost laughed at the thought. "No, simple is perfect." "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel cheated of a proper wedding." "Cole, I already had a proper wedding once. It was in a small church with borrowed flowers, and my husband wore his only good suit. It was perfect because he loved me and I loved him. That's all that matters in a wedding, the love. Everything else is just decoration." Cole's eyes softened. "You're a wise woman, Eleanor Gray." "Soon to be Eleanor Mercer," Lily piped up. "Right, Papa? She'll have our name?" "If she wants it," Cole said, looking at Eleanor with a question in his eyes. Eleanor thought about it. She'd been Eleanor Gray for so long, first as her father's daughter, then as William Gray's wife, then as William Gray's widow. The name carried memories both sweet and bitter. But Eleanor Mercer? That name carried possibility. Promise. A future instead of just a past. "Yes," she said. "I want it." The smile that broke across Cole's face was like sunrise. "Then you'll have it. As soon as you're well enough to stand before a preacher without falling over." "I can stand now," Eleanor protested. "The doctor said another 3 days of rest minimum. Don't make me tie you to this bed, woman." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "You wouldn't dare." "Papa would," Sam said gleefully. "He tied up a cow once when it wouldn't stay in the barn." "I am not a cow," Eleanor said with as much dignity as she could muster, which was difficult with 2 giggling children pressed against her sides. Cole grinned, and Eleanor realized with a start that it was the first time she'd seen him truly smile. It transformed his face, erasing years of grief and hardship, making him look younger and lighter. Handsome, even. "No," he agreed. "You're definitely not a cow. You're far more stubborn." Eleanor threw a pillow at him. He caught it easily, laughing, and the twins dissolved into shrieks of delight at seeing their father so playful. Mrs. Brennan appeared in the doorway, drawn by the noise. "Land's sake, what's all this commotion? You're supposed to be resting, not hosting a circus." "Papa called Elna stubborn," Lily reported. "Well, she is," Mrs. Brennan said matter-of-factly. "Now, off with you lot. Give the poor woman some peace. Mr. Mercer, there's a man from town asking to see you about the Sarah situation. And children, it's time for your lessons." The twins groaned but obeyed, climbing off the bed with exaggerated reluctance. Cole stood, but not before squeezing Eleanor's hand gently. "Rest," he ordered. "We'll talk about wedding plans when you're stronger." After they'd all gone, Eleanor lay back against the pillows and tried to process everything that had happened. 5 days ago, she'd been a barn worker, invisible and insignificant. Now she was engaged to be married to one of the most prominent ranchers in the territory, about to become stepmother to 2 children she already loved like her own. It should have felt impossible, unreal, like a dream she'd wake from at any moment. But when she looked at her bandaged hands, still healing from the frostbite she'd suffered saving those children, it was real enough. The pain was real. The love was real. This second chance at family and happiness, improbable as it seemed, was real. Eleanor closed her eyes and offered up a prayer of thanks to whatever divine providence had led her to Redwood Ranch. Then she slept, deeply and peacefully, without nightmares for the first time in years. The town's reaction to the engagement was exactly as Eleanor had feared and Cole had predicted. Word spread like wildfire, carried by ranch hands and household staff, until everyone within 50 miles knew that Cole Mercer was marrying his barn worker. The response was divided and passionate. Dutch and the other ranch hands were pleased, having seen firsthand how Eleanor had saved the children and how much lighter Cole seemed since she'd come into their lives. The more practical townspeople acknowledged that a widower with young children needed a wife, and Eleanor had proven herself capable and devoted. But the society women, the ones who'd had their eyes on Cole as a potential match for their daughters or themselves, were scandalized. They whispered about impropriety and gold digging and the unseemly haste of it all. They wondered aloud how Catherine Mercer's family would react to being replaced by a common widow with no breeding or connections. Dorothy Fleming led the charge of disapproval. She made a special trip to the ranch 3 days after the engagement was announced, ostensibly to check on the children after their ordeal, but really to confront Cole. Eleanor, still recovering in the guest room, heard raised voices from downstairs. She recognized Dorothy's sharp tones and Cole's deeper rumble, though she couldn't make out the words. After about 10 minutes, she heard the front door slam with enough force to rattle the windows. Cole appeared in her doorway a moment later, his jaw tight with anger. "What did she say?" Eleanor asked quietly. "Nothing worth repeating." Cole came to sit in the chair by her bed. "She's concerned for my reputation. She thinks I'm making a terrible mistake. She reminded me that Catherine came from a good family and any second wife should be held to the same standard." Eleanor's stomach twisted. "Maybe she's right. Maybe we should wait. Give people time to adjust to the idea." "No." Cole's voice was firm. "We're not waiting, and I don't care what Dorothy Fleming or anyone else thinks. Do you want to know what I told her?" Eleanor nodded, not trusting her voice. "I told her that Catherine would have loved you, that she'd have welcomed you into our family with open arms because she'd have seen what I see, a woman with more courage and compassion in her little finger than most people have in their whole bodies. I told her that my children adore you, that you've given them something I couldn't, and that anyone who has a problem with our marriage can take themselves off my property and never come back." "You didn't." "I absolutely did. And you know what? It felt good." Cole leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Eleanor, I need you to understand something. I'm not marrying you out of convenience or because I need a caretaker for my children. I'm marrying you because in the months since you came here, you've become essential to this family, to me, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise to spare people's feelings." Eleanor's breath caught. "What are you saying?" Cole reached for her hand, careful of her healing fingers. "I'm saying that somewhere between that first night when you sang my children to sleep and the night you nearly died saving them, I fell in love with you. Maybe not the way I loved Catherine. That was young love, first love, the kind that comes easy when you're both 20 and the world seems full of possibility. This is different, harder earned, built on shared grief and mutual respect and the daily choice to keep showing up for each other. But it's real, Eleanor, as real as anything I've ever felt." Eleanor stared at him, tears streaming down her face. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've been trying not to, trying to tell myself it was just gratitude or the need to belong somewhere. But it's not. It's love. The real, terrifying, wonderful kind." Cole stood and leaned over the bed, cupping her face in his hands. "Then let them talk. Let them gossip and judge and whisper. We know the truth. That's all that matters." He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, and Eleanor felt something inside her finally relax. This was right. This was meant to be. All the pain and loss she'd endured had led her here, to this moment, to this man, and these children who'd somehow become her whole world. When Cole pulled back, he was smiling. "The doctor says you can get up tomorrow. Walk around a bit, start rebuilding your strength. Think you can make it down to the parlor by the end of the week?" "Why the parlor?" "Because that's where we're getting married, this Sunday. I've already sent word to the preacher." Eleanor's eyes widened. "This Sunday? That's only 4 days away. Is that a problem?" "I don't have a dress. I don't have anything appropriate to wear to a wedding. Then we'll get you something. Mrs. Brennan can take you to town tomorrow if you're feeling up to it, or she can bring the dressmaker here, whatever you need. Cole, I can't afford. You're going to be my wife. What's mine is yours, including money for a wedding dress. Don't argue with me about this, Eleanor. Please, let me do this one thing. Eleanor wanted to protest, but the earnest look in his eyes stopped her. He needed to do this, she realized, needed to give her this gift, to show her that she was valued and precious. How could she deny him that? All right, she said softly. A dress, but nothing too fancy. I wouldn't feel like myself in silk and lace. Whatever you want. I just want you beside me, saying vows that make you mine and make me yours. The rest is just details. After Cole left, Eleanor lay in bed and tried to wrap her mind around the fact that in 4 days she'd be married. She'd be Eleanor Mercer, wife and mother, mistress of Redwood Ranch. The transformation from barn worker to lady of the house was so dramatic it made her dizzy. But when she thought about what it really meant, being able to love Cole and the twins openly, without fear or restraint, the dizziness faded, replaced by pure joy. The next morning, Eleanor was finally allowed out of bed. Her legs were shaky and her bandaged fingers made everything awkward, but it felt wonderful to be upright and moving again. Mrs. Brennan helped her dress in one of her old work dresses, since her better clothes were still in the barn loft, and guided her slowly down the stairs. The twins were waiting at the bottom, bouncing with excitement. You're up! You're up! Lily squealed. Can you come outside? Sam asked. Dutch said the new baby horse is walking now. Let her have breakfast first, Mrs. Brennan scolded. She's been in bed for days. She needs proper food before gallivanting around the ranch. Eleanor let herself be settled at the kitchen table, where Mrs. Brennan served her eggs and bacon and fresh bread with butter. The twins sat on either side of her, chattering about everything that had happened while she was recovering. How Papa had been sleeping in their room every night. How Dutch let them name the foal Brave, because Eleanor had been so brave. How they'd been practicing writing their letters to show her. Cole appeared while Eleanor was finishing her second cup of coffee. He looked tired. Clearly those nights sleeping in the twins' room had taken their toll, but he smiled when he saw her up and dressed. Ready for town? He asked. You're coming with us? Of course. You're buying your wedding dress. I'm not missing that. Mrs. Brennan made a disapproving noise. It's bad luck for the groom to see the dress before the wedding. I've had enough bad luck to last a lifetime, Cole said. I'll take my chances. The trip to town was Eleanor's first real outing since the night in the snow. She felt strangely fragile, as if the world had become both more precious and more dangerous. But with Cole's hand steady at her back and the twins holding her less injured fingers, she felt safe enough to face whatever waited. The town was busy with Christmas preparations. Garlands hung from shop windows, and the smell of pine and cinnamon filled the air. People stopped to stare as Cole's wagon rolled down Main Street, the notorious rancher and his scandalous bride-to-be out in public together. Eleanor lifted her chin and met their gazes steadily. She had nothing to be ashamed of. The dressmaker's shop was small but well-appointed. Mrs. Henderson, the proprietor, was a practical woman in her 50s who'd heard all the gossip but seemed more interested in making a good dress than passing judgment. So you need a wedding dress by Sunday, she said, looking Eleanor up and down with a professional eye. That's ambitious, but I have a dress that might work with some alterations. Let me show you. She disappeared into the back room and emerged with a dress in a soft dove gray. It wasn't the traditional white, but it was beautiful, simple, and elegant, with a modest neckline and long sleeves. It was made for a customer who changed her mind, Mrs. Henderson explained. Never been worn. I can take in the waist and adjust the hem. The color would suit you, I think. Not white, but for a second marriage, gray is perfectly appropriate. Eleanor touched the fabric reverently. It was nicer than anything she'd ever owned. How much? Mrs. Henderson named a price that made Eleanor's stomach drop, but Cole just nodded. We'll take it. Can you have it ready by Saturday? I can have it ready by Friday if you need it. Friday would be perfect. While Mrs. Henderson took Eleanor's measurements, Cole waited in the front of the shop with the twins. Eleanor could hear them through the curtain, Lily asking if Eleanor would look like a princess, and Sam wondering if there would be cake. Your young man seems smitten, Mrs. Henderson said quietly as she pinned the hem. "Don't let the gossips get to you, dear. I've lived in this town 40 years, and I've seen plenty of unconventional marriages that worked out fine. Love is love, regardless of where it starts." "Thank you," Eleanor said, surprised by the kindness. "That means more than you know." When Eleanor emerged from the back room back in her plain dress, she found the shop crowded. Several women had come in, ostensibly to browse, but really to get a look at Cole Mercer's intended. Dorothy Fleming stood at the center of the group, her expression cold. "Eleanor," she said, making the name sound like an insult. "How fortunate that you've recovered from your ordeal. Though I must say the haste of this wedding is quite shocking. One might almost think there's a reason for the rush." The implication was clear and ugly. Eleanor felt her face flush, but before she could respond, Cole stepped forward. "Mrs. Fleming," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I'm going to say this once, and I suggest you listen carefully. Eleanor Gray is going to be my wife. She's going to be the mother of my children and the mistress of my household. Any insult to her is an insult to me, and I don't tolerate insults kindly. Do we understand each other?" Dorothy's face went white, then red. You were merely spreading vicious gossip and making unfounded accusations, in front of my children, no less." Cole gestured to Lily and Sam, who were watching with wide eyes. "I think you owe Eleanor an apology." The silence in the shop was absolute. Every woman there held her breath, waiting to see what Dorothy would do. Finally, she inclined her head stiffly. "My apologies if I caused offense. I wish you both happiness." The word happiness sounded like she was wishing them plague, but it was something. Cole nodded curtly and ushered Eleanor and the twins out of the shop. Once they were back in the wagon, Eleanor let out a shaky breath. "You didn't have to do that. You've made an enemy of one of the most influential women in town." "I already had an enemy in her. At least now she knows where I stand." Cole took Eleanor's hand. "I meant what I said in there. Any insult to you is an insult to me. I won't stand for it, from Dorothy Fleming or anyone else." Eleanor squeezed his hand, love and gratitude welling up so strong she could barely breathe. "What did I do to deserve you?" "You ran into a blizzard to save my children. I think that more than earns you a man willing to stand up to gossipy society women." The twins giggled from the back of the wagon, and even Eleanor had to smile. Maybe this marriage was unconventional. Maybe people would talk. But with Cole beside her and these children calling her name with such love and trust, she found she didn't care anymore. Let them talk. She had everything that mattered right here. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Mrs. Brennan threw herself into organizing the wedding with surprising enthusiasm, recruiting the ranch hands to help clean the parlor and dining room until they gleamed. The cook prepared a feast for after the ceremony: roasted chicken, fresh bread, winter vegetables, and a cake with white frosting that the twins kept trying to sneak tastes of. Eleanor moved her meager belongings from the barn loft to a proper bedroom. Not Cole's bedroom, not yet, but one of the guest rooms near the twins' nursery. It felt strange to sleep in a real bed again, to have a wardrobe for her clothes instead of a trunk, to look out windows at the ranch from inside the house instead of from the barn. Dutch helped make the transition easier. "You earned this," he said simply when he brought up the last of her things. "Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. You're good people, Eleanor. The best I've seen in a long time." Eleanor hugged him impulsively. "Thank you for being kind to me from the beginning. You didn't have to be." "Sure I did. It's what decent people do." He patted her shoulder awkwardly. "Now, about this wedding. I don't suppose you have anyone to give you away?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "No. My father's been dead for years, and I have no brothers." "Then I'd be honored to do it, if you'll have me. Been working for the Mercer family for 20 years. Feels right to be part of this new chapter." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I'd like that very much." The twins were involved in every aspect of the preparations, their excitement infectious. Lily picked wildflowers that Mrs. Brennan somehow kept alive in vases despite the December cold. Sam practiced walking very slowly and carefully, since he'd been designated ring bearer. They both talked constantly about how Eleanor would be their real mama now, not just their friend. "Will you tuck us in every night?" Lily asked one evening. "Every single night," Eleanor promised. "And read us stories? As many as you want. And sing the night song when we can't sleep?" Eleanor pulled Lily into her lap. "Always. Whenever you need it." Sam climbed up too, not wanting to be left out. "Papa says you're going to love us forever now. Is that true?" "I already love you forever," Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. "The wedding just makes it official." Cole, watching from the doorway, felt his heart clench at the sight of the three of them together. This was what he'd been hoping for when he'd proposed. Not just a caretaker for his children, but a true mother. Someone who loved them completely, who chose them deliberately. Eleanor was giving his children the greatest gift he could imagine, the security of unconditional love. And she was giving him something too. Hope. The possibility of happiness again. The courage to believe that his story wasn't over, that there were still good chapters to be written. On Friday, Mrs. Henderson delivered the finished dress. Eleanor tried it on in her new bedroom, and when she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The dove-gray fabric brought out the color in her eyes, and the dress fit perfectly, highlighting her slim waist and making her look elegant and proper. She looked like someone who belonged in a place like Redwood Ranch, someone who could be Cole Mercer's wife. "You're beautiful," Mrs. Brennan said from the doorway, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Absolutely beautiful." "It's just the dress," Eleanor said, but she couldn't stop looking at her reflection. "It's not the dress, child. It's you. You're glowing with happiness, and it shows." Mrs. Brennan came forward and adjusted the collar slightly. "I'll admit, when you first arrived, I had my doubts. Another worker to train, another mouth to feed. But you've proven me wrong in the best possible way. You're exactly what this family needed." Eleanor turned and embraced the older woman. "Thank you for giving me a chance, for defending me, for helping me find my place here." "You made your own place," Mrs. Brennan said firmly. "You just needed someone to open the door and let you through." That night, Eleanor lay in her bed and thought about the next day. In less than 24 hours, she'd be married. She'd be Eleanor Mercer, mother to Lily and Sam, wife to Cole. The thought filled her with joy tinged with a bittersweet ache. She thought about William, her first husband, who'd died so young. She thought about their baby, who'd never drawn more than a few breaths. She'd loved them both so deeply, and their loss had nearly destroyed her. But now she had a chance to love again, to build a family again, to be someone's wife and someone's mother. It felt like betrayal and blessing all at once. "I hope you understand," she whispered into the darkness, speaking to ghosts who couldn't answer. "I hope you know I'll never forget you, but I have to keep living. I have to take this chance at happiness while I can." The wind rattled the windows, and Eleanor chose to believe it was her answer. Permission. Benediction. A blessing from those she'd lost to embrace what she'd found. Tomorrow, she would marry Cole Mercer. Tomorrow, she would become a mother again. Tomorrow, her new life would truly begin. And she was ready. Sunday morning dawned cold and clear, the sky that particular shade of blue that only winter could produce. Eleanor woke before sunrise, her stomach fluttering with nerves and anticipation. She lay in bed for a moment, listening to the quiet house around her, trying to convince herself that this was really happening. Today she would marry Cole Mercer. Today she would become a mother again. Today, everything would change. A soft knock at her door made her sit up. "Come in," she called. Mrs. Brennan entered carrying a breakfast tray. "Thought you might want to eat in your room this morning. Save you from the chaos downstairs. The twins have been up since 5, too excited to sleep." Eleanor smiled despite her nerves. "How's Cole?" "Pacing in his study like a caged bear? You'd think he'd never been married before." Mrs. Brennan set the tray on the bedside table. "Eat something, even if you don't feel like it. You'll need your strength for today." Eleanor managed some toast and tea, though her stomach was too knotted to handle much more. After breakfast, Mrs. Brennan helped her bathe and wash her hair, then sat her down to dry it by the fire. The older woman's hands were gentle as she brushed out Eleanor's long brown hair, working through the tangles with patient care. "My mother used to do this," Eleanor said quietly, "before she died. I'd forgotten how comforting it is." "Everyone needs mothering sometimes," Mrs. Brennan said, even grown women about to become mothers themselves. When Eleanor's hair was dry, Mrs. Brennan helped her into the dove-gray dress. The fabric whispered against her skin as she moved, elegant and soft. Mrs. Brennan arranged her hair in a simple style, pinned up but with soft curls framing her face. She added a small spray of the wildflowers Lily had picked, their delicate petals somehow still fresh. "There," Mrs. Brennan said, stepping back to survey her work. "Perfect. Now let me look at you properly." Eleanor turned to face her, and the older woman's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, my dear girl, you're radiant. Cole Mercer is a lucky man." "I'm the lucky one," Eleanor whispered. "You're both lucky. That's how the best marriages work." Mrs. Brennan squeezed her hand. "Now, the preacher arrived an hour ago. Everyone's gathering in the parlor. Are you ready?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "I'm ready." But as she moved toward the door, a wave of panic suddenly washed over her. She gripped the door frame, her breath coming too fast. "What if I can't do this?" she gasped. "What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail them the way I failed my own family?" Mrs. Brennan turned her around and gripped both her shoulders firmly. "Eleanor Gray, you listen to me. You didn't fail anyone. Your husband died in an accident you couldn't prevent. Your baby died because he came too early, not because of anything you did or didn't do. You survived tragedy that would have broken lesser women, and you came out the other side still capable of love and compassion. That's not failure. That's courage." "But what if—" "No more what ifs. There's a good man downstairs who loves you. There are 2 children who think you hung the moon. There's a whole life waiting for you, if you're brave enough to take it. So the question is, are you brave enough?" Eleanor thought about the night she'd run into the blizzard. She'd been terrified then too, but she'd run anyway because the children needed her. She thought about every hard day since losing William and the baby. Every morning she'd woken up and chosen to keep going even when grief made her want to give up. She'd been brave then. She could be brave now. "Yes," Eleanor said, straightening her shoulders. "I'm brave enough." "That's my girl." Mrs. Brennan smiled and opened the door. "Then let's get you married." They descended the stairs together, Mrs. and Brennan a solid, reassuring presence at Eleanor's side. At the bottom, Dutch was waiting in his best suit, looking uncomfortable in the formal clothes but smiling warmly. "You look beautiful, Eleanor," he said, offering his arm. "Ready to do this?" "Ready," Eleanor confirmed, slipping her hand through his elbow. The parlor doors were closed. Beyond them, Eleanor could hear the murmur of voices. The ranch hands who'd been invited, the household staff, a few neighbors whom Cole considered friends. Not a large gathering, but enough to make it feel real and witnessed. Mrs. Brennan opened the doors, and suddenly Eleanor was looking into a room transformed. Winter sunlight streamed through the windows, making the polished wood floors gleam. More of Lily's wildflowers decorated every surface, their bright colors cheerful against the winter backdrop. The furniture had been pushed to the sides, creating an aisle down the center of the room, and at the end of that aisle stood Cole. He was wearing a black suit Eleanor had never seen before, his hair neatly combed, his jaw freshly shaved. But it was his expression that stole her breath, wonder and love and relief all mixed together, as if he'd been half afraid she wouldn't appear. Beside him stood the twins, dressed in their Sunday best. Lily wore a pink dress with ribbons, and Sam was in a little suit that made him look impossibly grown up. They were both bouncing with barely contained excitement. The preacher, an elderly man with kind eyes, smiled at Eleanor as she entered. "Shall we begin?" Dutch walked Eleanor down the makeshift aisle. It was only about 15 steps, but it felt like both the longest and shortest walk of her life. Every person in the room watched her pass, some with approval, some with curiosity, all with witness to this unlikely union. When they reached Cole, Dutch placed Eleanor's hand in Cole's and stepped back. Cole's fingers closed around hers, warm and steady, and Eleanor felt the last of her panic dissolve. "Hi," Cole said softly, just for her. "Hi," Eleanor whispered back. The preacher cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, but reverently, deliberately, and in the knowledge that love is both a feeling and a choice that must be made new each day." Eleanor barely heard the traditional words of the ceremony. She was too focused on Cole's face, on the way he looked at her like she was something precious and miraculous. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, a small gesture of comfort and connection. Cole Mercer, the preacher said, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part? I do, Cole said, his voice clear and certain. Absolutely I do. Eleanor Gray, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part? Eleanor looked at Cole, then at the twins standing beside him, then at the gathered witnesses who represented her new community. She thought about the woman she'd been when she arrived at Redwood Ranch, broken, desperate, barely surviving. And she thought about the woman she was now, healed enough to love again, strong enough to build a new family, brave enough to say yes to a future she never thought she'd have. I do, she said, her voice steady and sure. The rings, please. Sam stepped forward importantly, carrying a small cushion with 2 gold bands. His tongue poked out in concentration as he walked, determined not to drop them. When he reached the preacher, he held up the cushion with such solemnity that several people in the room had to hide smiles. Thank you, young man, the preacher said, taking the rings. Cole, place this ring on Eleanor's finger and repeat after me. With this ring, I thee wed. Cole took Eleanor's hand, his fingers trembling slightly as he slid the gold band onto her finger. With this ring, I thee wed, he repeated. Then, going off script, he added quietly, Thank you for saving us, all of us. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she took the second ring and slid it onto Cole's finger. With this ring, I thee wed, she said. Then, matching his improvisation, Thank you for giving me a home. The preacher smiled. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming and by God Almighty, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Cole, you may kiss your bride. Cole cupped Eleanor's face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle, and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and full of promise, not the passionate kiss of young lovers, but something deeper and more enduring, a kiss that acknowledged everything they'd both lost and everything they were choosing to build together. When they broke apart, the room erupted in applause. The twins rushed forward, throwing their arms around both adults in an enthusiastic group hug that nearly knocked everyone over. Mama! Lily cried, the word bursting out of her with pure joy. You're our mama now, for real! Eleanor's heart cracked wide open at hearing that word applied to her. She dropped to her knees, heedless of her beautiful dress, and gathered both children close. Yes, she whispered fiercely. I'm your mama now. For real. And always. Sam pulled back just enough to look at her seriously. You won't leave? Even when things get hard? Eleanor understood the fear behind that question. These children had lost their mother once already. They needed to know she wouldn't abandon them. I won't leave, she promised, looking him straight in the eyes. Not ever. You're stuck with me now, both of you. Good, Sam said, satisfied, and burrowed back into the hug. Cole crouched down beside them, and for a moment the 4 of them stayed there in a tight circle, a family newly made but already complete. Eleanor could hear people moving around them, preparing for the celebration meal, but she didn't care. This moment, this perfect, precious moment, was all that mattered. Finally, Dutch's voice broke through gently. All right, you lot, there's food getting cold and a cake that certain small people have been eyeing all morning. Maybe we should celebrate properly? They moved to the dining room, where the table was laden with more food than Eleanor had seen since she didn't know when. The ranch hands and household staff mingled, united in their genuine happiness for the newlyweds. Even the neighbors who'd come seemed won over by the obvious love between Cole and Eleanor. Eleanor found herself seated at the head of the table, Cole beside her, the twins on her other side. It felt surreal. Just months ago, she'd been eating alone in the barn loft, and now she was the lady of the house, surrounded by people celebrating her marriage. During the meal, Dutch stood and tapped his glass for attention. "I'd like to make a toast," he announced. "I've known Cole Mercer since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. Watched him grow up, take over this ranch, marry his first wife, and become a father. When Catherine died, I thought that might be the end of him. Thought the grief might swallow him whole." Cole's hand found Eleanor's under the table, squeezing gently. "But then this woman showed up," Dutch continued, gesturing to Eleanor. "Hired to work in the barn, nothing more. And somehow, through grace or fate or simple human decency, she became the heart this family needed. She gave those children their laughter back. She gave Cole his hope back. And she nearly died protecting them all. That's not just a worker. That's not just a convenience. That's family. That's love. So here's to Cole and Eleanor. May they have many happy years together, and may they always remember that the best families aren't always the ones we're born into, but the ones we choose." "Hear, hear," the room chorused, raising their glasses. Eleanor blinked back tears as she raised her own glass. The toast was simple but perfect, acknowledging both the unconventional nature of their union and the genuine love at its foundation. After the meal, there was cake, white frosting with yellow cake inside, decorated with more of Lily's wildflowers. The twins insisted on helping Eleanor and Cole cut the first slice together, their small hands pressed over the adults' hands on the knife. "This is the best day ever," Lily declared, her face covered in frosting. "The very best," Sam agreed, equally messy. As the afternoon wore on, people began to leave, offering congratulations and well wishes as they departed. The ranch hands returned to their work, the neighbors climbed into their wagons, until finally it was just the family, Cole and Eleanor and the twins and Mrs. Brennan, left in the house. "I should give you some privacy," Mrs. Brennan said tactfully. "I'll take the children upstairs. Get them ready for bed." "Can Mama do it?" Lily asked, using the new title without hesitation. "Can Mama tuck us in?" Eleanor looked at Cole, who nodded. "Of course she can. That's what mamas do." Eleanor changed out of her wedding dress and into something more practical, then made her way to the nursery where the twins were already in their nightclothes. She helped them brush their teeth, listened to their prayers, and tucked them into their respective beds. "Mama," Sam said as she was about to leave, "will you sing the night song?" Eleanor settled into the rocking chair between their beds. "Of course, sweetheart." She began to sing the lullaby that had brought them together that first night, and as she sang, she watched their eyelids grow heavy, their breathing slow and even. These children, her children now, legally and emotionally, were safe and loved and content. When she finished the last verse, both twins were asleep. Eleanor stood carefully and moved to the door, where she found Cole leaning against the frame, watching. "How long have you been standing there?" she whispered. "Long enough," he said softly. "Come with me. There's something I want to show you." He led her down the hall to the master bedroom, his bedroom, which Eleanor had never entered before. It was a large room, simply furnished but comfortable, with a massive bed and windows that looked out over the ranch. "This is our room now," Cole said. "If you want it to be. I know some couples maintain separate bedrooms, and if you'd prefer that, I understand. But I'd like to share this space with you, share my life with you, in every way." Eleanor looked around the room, seeing traces of Cole everywhere. His books on the nightstand, his clothes in the wardrobe, his personal items on the dresser. It was intimate and intimidating and exactly what she wanted. "I'd like that," she said. "But Cole, I need to tell you something first." He turned to her, concern crossing his face. "What is it?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "I know you said you loved me, and I believe you. But I also know you loved Catherine first. And I need you to know that I'm not trying to replace her or make you forget her. She was the twins' mother, your first wife, and she'll always be part of this family's story. I don't resent that. I want to make sure we're clear about that." Cole crossed the room and took both her hands. "Eleanor, you're not replacing Catherine. You're writing a new chapter. And yes, I loved her. I'll always love her memory. But what I feel for you is different and equally real. You're not second best or a consolation prize. You're the woman who taught me that my heart could work again, that I could love again. That's a gift I can never repay." "You don't have to repay it," Eleanor said. "Just love me. Love the children. Build this life with me. That's all I need. Cole pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. Eleanor rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. This was real. This was hers. This man, these children, this home, all of it was hers now. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other before Cole spoke again. I should warn you, I snore sometimes, and I'm terrible about leaving my boots in the middle of the floor, and I have nightmares occasionally about losing the ranch, or the cattle dying, or... Eleanor put a finger to his lips. Cole, I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be here. I can do that, he promised. I'm very good at being here. They talked late into the night, lying in bed together, sharing the small details of their lives that they hadn't had time to share before. Cole told her about growing up on the ranch, about his parents, about his dreams for expanding the operation. Eleanor told him about her childhood on the farm, about William, about the baby she'd lost, and how it had nearly destroyed her. I'm so sorry you went through that alone, Cole said, pulling her closer. I'm not alone anymore, Eleanor replied. That's what matters. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them both. Eleanor drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, in their bed, in their home. For the first time in years, she felt completely safe. She was woken hours later by small footsteps in the hallway. The door creaked open, and Sam's voice whispered, Mama, I had a bad dream. Eleanor sat up immediately. Come here, sweetheart. Sam padded over to the bed, and Cole helped lift him up. The little boy crawled between them, burrowing into the warmth. What was the dream about? Eleanor asked softly. You left. You went away like our first mama. Eleanor's heart clenched. I'm right here, Sam. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? I promise. A moment later, the door opened again and Lily appeared, apparently unwilling to be left out. If Sam gets to sleep in here, so do I. Cole chuckled and pulled her up too. All right then. Family pile it is. The four of them squeezed into the big bed together, the twins in the middle, Cole and Eleanor on either side. It wasn't how most people spent their wedding night, Eleanor thought with amusement, but it was perfect for them. This is nice, Lily murmured, already half asleep again. Very nice, Sam agreed. Cole reached across the children to take Eleanor's hand. In the darkness, she could see him smiling. Welcome to married life, he whispered. Wouldn't have it any other way, Eleanor whispered back. Winter gave way to spring, and spring to summer. Eleanor settled into her role as wife and mother with a sense of rightness she'd never expected to feel again. She learned the rhythms of running a ranch household, working alongside Mrs. Brennan to manage everything from meals to linens to the endless stream of repairs and maintenance that a place like Redwood Ranch required. The twins flourished under her care, growing taller and more confident with each passing month. Lily discovered a love of reading, and Eleanor spent hours with her, teaching her letters and words. Sam proved to have a gift with animals, following Dutch around the barn and learning everything the old foreman would teach him. The gossip about Eleanor's marriage to Cole gradually faded, replaced by newer scandals and dramas. Even Dorothy Fleming eventually softened, if not to friendship, then at least to grudging acceptance. Eleanor had proven herself not through grand gestures, but through the quiet, daily work of loving her family and contributing to her community. But the real change came in the fall, nearly a year after the wedding, when Eleanor realized she was pregnant. She'd been so certain she could never have another child after losing her son. The midwife had warned her that women who lost babies born too early often couldn't carry again. Eleanor had made her peace with that, grateful for the stepchildren she'd been given. So when she missed her monthly courses and began feeling sick in the mornings, she barely dared to hope. The doctor confirmed it on a Tuesday afternoon. About 3 months along, I'd say. Due sometime in late March or early April. Eleanor sat in his office, her hands pressed to her still flat stomach, tears streaming down her face. Are you all right, Mrs. Mercer? The doctor asked, concerned. I'm perfect, Eleanor managed. I just never thought this could happen again. Well, it is happening. You're healthy and strong, and I see no reason this pregnancy shouldn't go smoothly, but you'll need to take care of yourself. No heavy lifting, plenty of rest, good food. Eleanor nodded, barely hearing him. She was going to have a baby, Cole's baby. a sibling for Lily and Sam, a living, breathing testament to the fact that second chances were real. She drove home in a daze, her mind spinning with the news. How would Cole react? Would he be happy, worried? They'd never discussed having more children. It had seemed like something that might never happen. When she reached the ranch, she found Cole in the barn, checking on a mare who'd been sick. He looked up when she entered, and his smile faded when he saw her face. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, coming to her side. "What did the doctor say? Are you ill?" "No," Eleanor said, her voice shaking. "No, I'm not ill. I'm pregnant." Cole froze, his eyes wide. "You're what?" "Pregnant. About 3 months. The doctor says everything looks good, that there's no reason to think—" She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice her fear that she might lose this baby too. But Cole understood. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "Eleanor," he whispered into her hair. "My God. A baby. Our baby." "You're happy?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. Cole pulled back just enough to look at her face, and she saw tears in his eyes. "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it. Eleanor, you've already given me so much. You brought light back into this house, love back into my life. You've been an incredible mother to Lily and Sam. And now we get to create a new life together. How could I be anything but overjoyed?" Eleanor sagged against him in relief. "I was afraid you might think it was too soon, or that it would complicate things with the twins. The twins will be thrilled. They'll have a baby brother or sister to dote on." Cole cupped her face in his hands. "Eleanor, this is a blessing, a gift, and I promise you I will be here for every moment of it. You won't go through this alone." "I know," Eleanor said. And she did know, bone deep. This wasn't like before, when she'd been widowed and frightened and facing birth alone. She had Cole now. She had a family. She had a home. They told the twins that evening over supper. Eleanor had worried about how they'd react. Would they feel displaced by a new baby, jealous of the attention it would require? But she'd underestimated them. "A baby!" Lily shrieked, jumping up from her chair. "A real baby that we can hold and play with?" "Well, you'll have to be gentle," Eleanor cautioned. "Babies are very delicate." "I'll be so gentle," Lily promised. "The most gentle big sister ever." Me too," Sam said, though he looked more nervous than excited. "But Mama, what if the baby doesn't like me?" Eleanor pulled him onto her lap. "The baby will love you, sweetheart. How could they not? You're going to be the best big brother in the whole world." "Will the baby look like us?" Lily asked. "Maybe," Cole said, "or maybe they'll look like their mama. We'll have to wait and see." "I hope they look like Mama," Sam said loyally. "Mama's pretty." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. The pregnancy was already making her more emotional than usual. "Thank you, Sam. That's very sweet." That night, after the twins were asleep, Eleanor and Cole lay in their bed and talked about the future. Names they might choose. How they'd need to prepare the small room next to the nursery as a baby's room. All the practical considerations of adding another child to their family. But underneath those practical concerns was something deeper. Wonder at the unexpected blessing, gratitude for the second chance at parenthood, and a profound hope that this time everything would turn out right. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter. Eleanor continued her daily routines as much as possible, though Cole and Mrs. Brennan both hovered nervously, insisting she rest more and do less. The twins were endlessly fascinated by her growing belly, talking to it, and feeling for kicks once the baby started moving. "I felt it," Lily exclaimed one afternoon in February, her hand pressed to Eleanor's stomach. "The baby kicked me." "That means they like you," Eleanor said, running her fingers through Lily's hair. "Of course they do," Lily said with confidence. "I'm going to be the best big sister ever." True to his word, Cole was present for everything. He accompanied Eleanor to every doctor's appointment, held her when the fear of losing another baby became overwhelming, and reminded her constantly that she wasn't alone in this. "I love you," he told her one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her swollen belly. "I love you for yourself, not just for this baby. Whether this child makes it or not, God forbid, you are precious to me. Do you understand that?" Eleanor did understand, and it made all the difference. She wasn't just a vessel for a child, valued only for what she could produce. She was loved for herself, and that knowledge gave her strength to face her fears. The baby, a boy, the doctor eventually determined, arrived on a warm April afternoon 3 weeks before his due date. Eleanor's labor was long but manageable, and this time she had Cole beside her every moment, holding her hand and encouraging her. When the baby finally emerged, pink and squalling and very much alive, Eleanor burst into tears. "He's breathing," she sobbed. "He's crying. He's alive." "He's perfect," Cole said, his own face wet with tears as the doctor placed the baby in Eleanor's arms. Absolutely perfect. The baby, they named him Thomas, after Cole's father, was indeed perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a healthy set of lungs, and his mother's dark eyes. Eleanor held him and counted his breaths, marveling at each one, still half afraid he might stop. But he didn't stop. He breathed and cried and nursed and slept like babies do, growing stronger with each passing day. The twins met their baby brother the next morning, approaching the bed where Eleanor held him with expressions of awe. "He's so tiny," Sam whispered. "You were that tiny once," Eleanor told him. "Hard to believe, isn't it?" "Can I hold him?" Lily asked. Eleanor and Cole helped her sit in the rocking chair with a pillow in her lap, then carefully placed Thomas in her arms. Lily held him with such tenderness, such careful reverence, that Eleanor felt her heart might burst. "Hi, Thomas," Lily whispered to her baby brother. "I'm your big sister. I'm going to take care of you always and always." Sam got his turn next, equally careful and gentle. When Thomas wrapped his tiny hand around Sam's finger, the little boy's face lit up with wonder. "He likes me," Sam said. "Sam, yeah. He's holding my hand." "Of course he likes you," Cole said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're his big brother." Eleanor watched her family gathered around the new baby, Cole standing behind the twins, all of them focused on Thomas with such love and joy, and felt a peace settle over her that she'd never expected to feel again. She'd lost so much. Her first husband, her first baby, years of her life to grief and survival. She'd arrived at Redwood Ranch with nothing but a canvas bag and a broken heart, expecting nothing more than a place to work and sleep. Instead, she'd found a family, found love, found a reason to believe that broken things could be mended and broken people could be made whole. Thomas stirred in Lily's arms and began to fuss. Eleanor took him back and put him to her breast, where he latched on immediately, nursing with the determined focus of a hungry newborn. "He's strong," the doctor said approvingly when he checked on them later. "Strong and healthy. No signs of any trouble. I think you've got a fighter there, Mrs. Mercer." "Like his mother," Cole said, squeezing Eleanor's shoulder. Spring turned to summer and summer to fall. Thomas grew from a tiny newborn to a chubby, happy baby who smiled at everyone and everything. The twins were devoted to him, fighting over who got to hold him or make him laugh or help with his baths. The ranch prospered too. Cole's careful management and the hard work of his men resulted in a good year with healthy cattle and strong profits. He used some of that profit to expand the house, adding more bedrooms and a proper office where Eleanor could manage the household accounts. "You've got a head for numbers," he told her one evening as they went over the books together. "Better than mine, truth be told." "That's because you're too generous," Eleanor said, pointing to an entry where he'd extended credit to a struggling neighbor. "You can't carry the whole territory on your back, Cole." "Can't I?" he teased. "Watch me." But he listened to her advice, and together they made decisions that strengthened the ranch while still maintaining Cole's reputation for fairness and generosity. One crisp October afternoon, nearly 2 years after their wedding, Eleanor stood on the porch watching her family. Cole and Dutch were in the corral, teaching Sam how to ride a gentle mare. Lily was in the garden with Mrs. Brennan, harvesting the last of the vegetables before the first frost. Thomas was in Eleanor's arms, babbling happily and reaching for the bright leaves that drifted past on the wind. It was an ordinary moment, nothing special or remarkable. But to Eleanor, it was everything. She thought about the woman she'd been when she'd stepped off that stagecoach 2 years ago, frightened, desperate, barely hanging on. She'd been hired to clean a barn to stay invisible and out of the way. But love had other plans. Love had drawn her to the main house when children cried. Love had given her the courage to run into a blizzard. Love had opened her heart to the possibility of family again. And love had transformed her from a barn worker into a wife, a mother, and the heart of Redwood Ranch. "Mama," Lily called from the garden, "come see! We found a pumpkin big enough for 2 pies." "Mama, watch!" Sam shouted from the corral. "I'm trotting." Eleanor laughed and called back to both of them, her heart full to overflowing. Thomas grabbed a fistful of her hair and tugged, making her wince and laugh at the same time. Cole caught her eye from across the yard and smiled. That smile that was just for her, that said without words how grateful he was for everything she'd brought into his life. Eleanor smiled back, bouncing Thomas gently to keep him entertained. This was her life now. These were her people. This was her home. She'd been hired just to clean the barn, true enough, but she'd ended up cleaning the grief from a wounded family's hearts, including her own. She'd swept away the cobwebs of sorrow and let light back in. She'd taken a house full of broken people and helped make them whole again. And in the process, she'd saved herself. The Wyoming wind picked up, carrying the scent of hay and wood smoke and the promise of winter to come. Eleanor breathed it in deeply, holding her son close, surrounded by the sounds of her family living and laughing and being together. This was grace, she thought. This was redemption. This was the proof that even the darkest nights eventually give way to dawn, and even the most broken hearts can learn to love again. She'd come to Redwood Ranch as Eleanor Gray, a widow with nothing left to lose. But she would live out her days as Eleanor Mercer, wife, mother, and beloved member of a family that had been built not on blood alone, but on the choice to keep showing up for each other, day after day, through storm and sunshine alike. And that, Eleanor knew with absolute certainty, was more than enough. It was everything.